The first scream wasn't human, it was mechanical. Shrill, unrelenting, the fire alarm blared through the hallways of Lincoln High like a siren from a war zone. Desks screeched across the floor as chairs were shoved back, students scrambled to grab their phones, and the fluorescent lights flickered as if reacting to the chaos. Zora Carter blinked once, then calmly stood up from her seat. Most students panicked. She analyzed. She knew immediately it wasn't a real fire. Not from the way the smoke detectors hadn't gone off. Not from the way the system initiated in sequence, Hall A, then B, then C, like it had been triggered remotely. Someone had tripped the system. But not just anyone. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Outside, students spilled into the parking lot like ants shaken from a jar, clustered in tight groups, laughing nervously or scrolling on their phones. Zora stood at the edge of the crowd, alone. Again. She reached into the pocket of her hoodie, pulling out a small silver USB drive, fingers moving quickly behind her back. Plugged it into her phone. Launched the backdoor diagnostic script she'd written months ago, just for fun. Just in case. It took 38 seconds to pinpoint the breach in the school's security system. It had been hacked through the library's forgotten router, an open port left unsecured since 2015. Her eyes narrowed as lines of code flickered across her screen. She could shut it down. Right now. Instead, she paused. She looked around. Teachers yelled. Students laughed. The school's security officer was fumbling with a radio like it was his first day on Earth. No one knew what was happening. Zora tapped twice, and the alarm stopped. Instantly. And then, silence. The moment stretched like plastic wrap about to tear. And that's when it started, the staring. At first, just a few students near her. Then the assistant principal, Mr. Dorsey. Then Ms. Finch, her English teacher, who narrowed her eyes with something between awe and suspicion. Zora Carter, tall, slim, brown-skinned with her signature twist-out hair and NASA hoodie, hadn't said a word. But everyone knew. She had done something. When you're a genius, you learn early on, silence is both a shield and a spotlight. Zora hadn't meant to stand out. Not today. Especially not after last week's incident in physics class, where she corrected Mr. Barron's lesson on quantum entanglement with a detailed breakdown that left even the substitute scratching his head. She didn't crave attention. She craved connection. But attention? It followed her like a storm cloud. Back inside the building, once the all-clear had been given, students whispered as they walked past her. Some stared. Others smirked. She probably caused the alarm just to look smart. Why is she always acting like she's better than everyone? I bet she's AI or something. Zora tucked her phone away and kept walking, eyes forward, chin level, like she didn't hear any of it. She'd learned a long time ago, reacting just gives them more power. But in her gut, a familiar ache returned. The kind that came from trying to make yourself smaller when your mind refused to shrink. Fifth period was social studies with Mr. Gray, and as Zora slid into her seat at the back corner of the room, she noticed something strange. The seat next to hers, usually empty, was occupied. A boy. Slouched hoodie, notebook covered in rough sketches of comic characters. He glanced at her, then quickly looked back at his drawing. Interesting. No snide comment. No weird look. Just, normal. She filed it away like she did everything, precisely, silently, carefully. Class, Mr. Gray called out, clapping his hands to get everyone's attention. Let's all thank Zora Carter for saving us from standing in the cold for 20 more minutes. There was scattered applause. Forced. Awkward. Zora wanted to melt into the floor. Mr. Gray turned toward her with a grin. Seriously, though. I don't know how you did it, but nice work. She gave a small nod and looked away. She didn't want to explain that she'd reverse engineered the school's outdated firewall last semester just for fun. Or that she could probably run this building more efficiently than the admin team. Or that maybe, just maybe, all she really wanted was to eat lunch without people pointing at her. That's all. Lunch was the worst part of the day. The cafeteria at Lincoln High was more of a social battleground than a place to eat. Tables were carved up by unwritten laws, cheerleaders near the front, football guys flanking the sides, art kids by the windows, and somewhere in the back, the kids who didn't belong anywhere. Zora had tried, during the first week, to sit with the STEM club. They hadn't exactly welcomed her. "You make the rest of us look bad," one had said with a sneer. Since then, she sat alone. Not by choice. Just, by default. Today was no different. She got her tray, pizza, a bruised apple, and a tiny carton of chocolate milk, and walked toward her usual seat near the exit sign. Whispers floated through the air. She hacked the alarm. "I bet she's spying on all of us. She thinks she's so smart." Zora's hands trembled slightly as she opened the milk carton. She didn't cry. She never cried at school. Instead, she stared at the tray, the pizza growing colder, and imagined what it might be like to sit at a table where someone asked her how her day was going. Where someone wanted to hear what she thought. Not because she was smart. Just because, she was Zora. Was that so much to ask? Later that evening, in her small bedroom with the string lights and worn-out bookshelf, Zora opened her laptop. She pulled up a blank file. Labeled it, "Just Thoughts." And began typing. What would you do if your own brilliance made you the outcast? If every time you opened your mouth, people decided to hate you just a little bit more? Everyone wants to be seen. But not all of us want to be watched. Maybe this story won't go anywhere. But maybe someone, somewhere, understands. If you're reading this. I'm Zora. I'm tired of being a genius. I just want a friend. Left Speech Bubble, hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Zora Carter didn't start out as the smartest girl in the room. She started as the quietest. Back in Chicago, before the scholarships and the awards, before the IQ test that turned heads, Zora was just the girl who asked too many questions and spent too much time alone in the school library. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, she just genuinely wanted to know things. Why does time feel slower when you're sad? Can light be bent around corners? Do plants feel sunlight the way we feel warmth? She asked her dad that last one when she was 6. They were sitting on their old apartment's fire escape, him smoking a cigarette, her holding a tattered copy of Curious George Goes to the Hospital. Her dad didn't have all the answers. But he always listened like she had just said something brilliant. His name was James Carter, South Side born, a mechanic by trade, part-time poet by heart. He wore grease-stained overalls and kept a copy of Langston Hughes' poems tucked into his back pocket. Zora's curiosity, her hunger for knowledge, came from him. So did her habit of scribbling ideas into the margins of whatever she was reading. The day he was killed, Zora was 9. He had stopped at the corner store for milk. Wrong place, wrong time. That night, her mother, Carla, held Zora so tightly she thought her ribs might crack. They didn't talk much about what happened, not because they didn't feel it, but because everything hurt too much. Zora stopped asking questions for a while. But the thoughts didn't stop. They just went underground. Her mother tried to hold it together. Carla worked double shifts as a nurse, leaving early, coming home late, her eyes always tired but her hugs still strong. "Promise me one thing, Z," she'd whisper as she tucked Zora in, the weight of the world in her voice. "Don't ever dim yourself for other people." It was easy to make that promise at 9. Harder at 14. Lincoln High was supposed to be a fresh start. The private school in the suburbs, the fancy laptop they gave her, the accelerated STEM curriculum, everything Zora needed to thrive on paper. But paper didn't tell the whole story. From the first day, she knew she didn't fit. Her skin, her hair, her speech, it all made her stick out like a burn mark on white linen. Even the other black kids looked at her like she was trying too hard. Too proper. Too smart. Too weird. There's a certain kind of loneliness that comes with being misunderstood not for who you are, but for who people assume you're trying to be. Zora wasn't trying to be better than anyone. She was just trying not to disappear. She kept her head down most days. Answered questions only when called on. Finished her assignments in half the time but never bragged about it. Still, her name made its way into whispered conversations. She's the girl who got a perfect SAT score in 8th grade. She's the one who built her own computer from parts off Craigslist. Her mom's a nurse. I heard they live in a one-bedroom. People didn't always say it out loud, but Zora could hear what they meant. She was an outsider. But she hadn't always been alone. There was Julius. Back in Chicago, Julius was her neighbor, her best friend, and her co-conspirator in all things nerdy. They used to build Lego cities in the hallway, stay up late watching Neil deGrasse Tyson lectures, and draw their own comic books where Zora was a superhero called Nova Girl, a black girl with cosmic powers who saved the universe with her brain. Julius made her laugh like nobody else could. He was the only one who made her feel normal. Then, he moved to Atlanta. And Zora packed herself up like a box of old memories. At Lincoln, the closest thing she had to a connection was with her chemistry teacher, Ms. Lee, who once pulled her aside and said, "You don't have to downplay your intelligence, Zora. It's not a burden. It's a gift." But that wasn't how it felt. It felt like being a candle in a room full of mirrors. Every time she shined, someone reflected it back as something twisted. Friday night. Zora sat at the kitchen table in their tiny apartment, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Her mom was on the couch, out cold from her second shift, still in scrubs, a cold coffee in her hand. Zora looked over at her, heart tight. Carla Carter had given up so much so her daughter could have more. And yet, Zora didn't feel like she had more. She felt invisible. Or worse, unwanted. She opened her laptop and started typing again. Everyone thinks being smart is like having a superpower. But what if your superpower just made people hate you? I'd trade half my IQ for one real friend. Someone who didn't flinch when I said something nerdy. Someone who didn't laugh when I talked about wormholes. Someone who saw me, not just my brain. Zora closed the file and sighed, rubbing her eyes. She didn't want to be the genius kid, or the outcast, or the girl who hacked the fire alarm. She just wanted someone to sit with at lunch. Someone to walk to class with. Someone who didn't make her feel like every word out of her mouth was a reason to be excluded. It was such a small thing. But it felt like the biggest wish in the world. She looked over at her mom again. Carla stirred, half awake now, blinking blearily in the blue light of the TV. "Hey, baby," she murmured. "You okay?" Zora nodded. "Yeah. Just thinking." Her mom smiled, soft and tired. "Well, don't think too hard, genius. You still gotta get some rest." Zora smiled back. "Yes, ma'am." As she lay in bed later, her ceiling glowing with little glow-in-the-dark stars she'd stuck there when they first moved in, Zora whispered something into the quiet. Just in case anyone, or anything, was listening. Please. Just one real friend. She didn't know if the universe worked that way. But she was a scientist. And sometimes, even scientists had to hope. On Monday morning, the school halls felt tighter. Zora walked through them with the practiced focus of someone navigating a minefield, eyes down, steps light, backpack hugged close to her back like a shield. Whispers followed her like shadows, too quiet to fully catch, too loud to ignore. "She's the fire drill girl. She's that brainiac. Creepy smart. She's probably spying for the teachers. It didn't matter that none of it was true. Truth never mattered in high school. Her first class was Honors Algebra 2 with Mr. Kane, a tired-looking man who only came alive when explaining parabolas. Zora had already mastered the entire semester's material over winter break, for fun. She sat in the front row, mostly because no one else ever did. When Mr. Kane wrote a problem on the board involving quadratic regression and the class fell silent, Zora raised her hand like usual. Actually, she said gently, you forgot to factor out the leading coefficient. He turned, blinked, and adjusted his glasses. Oh, yes. You're right, Zora. Thank you. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just lowered her hand and took notes. Behind her, someone whispered, she's so annoying. It wasn't the first time someone said it. And it wouldn't be the last. Zora had learned long ago that the world didn't always reward girls who were too smart, especially not black girls. People praised her intelligence when it was convenient, when it made them look good. But when it got too visible, too impossible to ignore, it became a threat. And threats got isolated. Later that day, she passed the STEM Club's bulletin board in the East Wing hallway. Mathletes practice today at 4 p.m., room 217, the flyer read. Zora hesitated. She hadn't gone to a meeting yet. Not since that icy encounter with Dylan, the junior team captain, during orientation. We usually go for teamwork over solo acts, he had said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. But maybe things had changed. Maybe it was time to try again. Room 217 was already buzzing when she arrived. Students huddled over notebooks, whispering in pairs, equations scribbled across whiteboards. The room smelled like dry erase markers and ambition. Zora scanned the group and saw him, Dylan, sandy blonde with wire-rimmed glasses and the confident posture of someone who always knew he was the smartest guy in the room. Until now. She walked in quietly and sat at an empty table. No one said hi. No one looked up. Dylan approached with a clipboard and said, "You here to watch or participate?" Zora met his eyes. Participate. His smile tightened. Okay. Pop quiz, then. You're familiar with nonlinear optimization, right? Of course, she said. He raised an eyebrow, then rattled off a problem so long it could have passed for a physics dissertation. Zora listened, nodded, pulled a marker from her pocket, and walked to the board. 3 minutes later, she had it solved, clean, accurate, and elegantly simple. The room was silent. Dylan cleared his throat. Lucky guess. Zora didn't reply. She didn't need to. That night, she got the email. Hey Zora. After talking with the team, we've decided we're going in a different direction. Thanks for stopping by. Dylan. No reason. No invitation to try again. Just no. The next day, things got worse. Someone slipped a note into her locker. Smart doesn't mean special. Folded neatly. No name. No context. But Zora understood exactly what it meant. By Wednesday, even the teachers seemed cautious. During biology, Ms. Vance asked a question about RNA transcription. Zora raised her hand, but the teacher pointed to another student who clearly didn't know the answer. Zora's hand slowly lowered, heart sinking. It wasn't just about knowing things. It was the way people felt about her knowing things. Like every correct answer was a personal attack. Like her very existence was a constant reminder of what others weren't. She never bragged. Never corrected unless asked. Never rubbed it in. And still, it wasn't enough. At lunch, Zora sat at her usual corner table. She tried to eat, but the voices behind her were louder today. She acts like she's better than everyone. Can't wait till she screws up. She probably sleeps with a dictionary. Zora clenched her jaw. Bit into her apple too hard. Told herself it didn't matter. But it did. It always did. That afternoon, she called her mom on the walk home. Carla answered on the third ring, her voice tired but warm. "Hey baby girl." "Hey," Zora said, trying to sound normal. "Just checking in. Everything okay?" "Yeah. I guess. Just, tough day." Her mom was quiet for a second. Then, "You being you?" Zora laughed, a little bitter. "Too much, apparently. You don't owe the world an apology for your mind, Z." "I know," she said, even though she didn't feel it. "I love you," Carla added, softly but fiercely. "You hear me?" Zora nodded, even though her mom couldn't see it. "I hear you." That night, Zora sat at her desk and opened her journal again. This time, she didn't just type. She ranted. "I'm not trying to be better than anyone. But I'm not going to pretend to be less. It's like everyone wants me to dull myself so they feel okay. But if I don't shine, who am I even doing this for? Being brilliant shouldn't be a punishment. Should it?" She stared at the blinking cursor. Then added one more line. "Why is it so hard to just, belong?" The next day would bring more whispers. More stares. But Zora wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. It started with a seat. Just one. The empty chair across from the art kid's table, graffiti-splattered backpacks, sketchbooks layered like trapdoors, and the faint smell of paint markers drifting through the cafeteria air. Zora had walked by that table 100 times. Never once considered stopping. But today, something felt different. Maybe it was the exhaustion from pretending not to care. Maybe it was the email she drafted and deleted 3 times, subject line, requesting transfer. Maybe it was just the simple fact that the alone was starting to feel heavier than the fear. Whatever it was, she turned. And stood there. "Can I sit here?" The group fell quiet. There were 4 of them, a girl with short green hair and galaxy leggings, a guy sketching graffiti letters on a napkin, another wearing headphones around his neck like armor, and finally, the boy she'd noticed last week, hoodie, comic book doodles, not one drop of judgment in his eyes. They stared. Zora waited. Then green hair shrugged. "Sure, I guess." Zora sat. No one said much at first. The boy next to her, comic doodles guy, glanced up once and gave a nod. Not a big gesture, but not a dismissal either. That nod carried her through the entire lunch period. His name, she learned the next day, was Elijah. He always carried a mechanical pencil tucked behind his ear and spoke like he was trying not to interrupt his own thoughts. He loved comics, real ones, obscure ones, the ones that never got made because the creators ran out of money. Zora recognized the drawing on his notebook, Nova Girl, the superhero she and Julius had invented as kids. "No way," she said softly. "That's Nova Girl." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "You know her?" Zora smiled, the first real smile she'd worn at school in weeks. "I created her. Well, me and my best friend, back when we were 10. He stared at her, then down at his sketch. "No kidding. I found her in this abandoned DeviantArt account 2 years ago. Just 1 page. Been trying to recreate the rest ever since." Zora blinked. "Wait, you drew that?" He nodded slowly. "Been wondering who made her. I always figured it was someone brilliant." The word hit differently this time. Brilliant. Not weird. Not annoying. Not too much. Just, brilliant. That moment changed everything. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But like the slow melting of ice in spring, quiet, deliberate, undeniable. Zora kept coming back to their table. She didn't say much at first. Mostly listened. Learned that green hair was named Tessa, and she could paint an entire mural from memory. That the headphones kid, Miles, made his own synth tracks on GarageBand and wanted to score movies someday. That graffiti guy, Danny, was obsessed with perspective and always talked about transferring to a visual arts magnet school. They weren't like the STEM kids or the athletes or the Instagram-obsessed crowd. They didn't ask where she lived or how many AP classes she was taking. They just let her be. But Lincoln High doesn't let anyone exist without challenge for long. On Friday, Zora arrived at her locker to find a sheet of paper taped to it. Typed in all caps, centered, bold. Lunch table IQ check, you gotta be this normal to sit with US. Underneath was a fake IQ test, ridiculous questions, absurd answers. Zora stared at it, pulse rising. Around her, students giggled. Walked past. Whispered. She pulled the paper down and crumpled it. She didn't cry. But her hands shook. Later, in the computer lab, she stared at her screen and did what she always did when emotions got too big. She analyzed. Who had access to the school printer? Who knew her locker combo? Who had a grudge? She narrowed it down to 5 suspects in under 2 minutes. But she didn't want revenge. She wanted respite. That afternoon at the art table, she was quiet. Elijah noticed. You okay? Zora hesitated, then slid the crumpled flyer onto the table. Tessa picked it up. Read it. Snorted. What kind of fragile little troll made this? Danny looked over her shoulder. IQ check. Seriously? This feels like Dylan. Miles nodded. Definitely Dylan. Zora blinked. You think Dylan did this? Tessa scoffed. The boy's been spiraling ever since you out-mated him. His ego's fragile. Zora hadn't even realized they knew what had happened. You heard about that? She asked. Everyone did, Elijah said. But not everyone thinks you're the villain, you know. Zora didn't speak for a moment. Then, I'm just tired of always being too much. Elijah tapped his pencil on the table. You're not too much, he said. You're just in the wrong ecosystem. That made her smile. Biology metaphor. Nice. He grinned. I try. That night, Zora did something she hadn't done in a while. She opened a blank canvas in her drawing software and recreated the first page of Nova Girl, modern, sharper, better than the one she and Julius had sketched all those years ago. Nova Girl stood tall, afro glowing like a halo, cape swirling around her like stardust. Underneath, she typed. She wasn't made to be liked. She was made to save galaxies. Zora Carter wasn't trying to save a galaxy. She just wanted to survive high school. But maybe, with the right people by her side, she could do both. Zora woke up on Monday to the buzzing of her phone. She stared at the screen. No messages. Just one notification, school bulletin. She opened it, expecting the usual announcements, clubs, sports, schedules. But this time, a headline caught her eye. Lincoln High to launch new coding competition, the Future Innovators Challenge. A flyer linked to the announcement. She tapped it. The Future Innovators Challenge. Calling all creators, problem solvers, and innovators. This competition is open to all students. Build a solution to a real-world problem using coding and design. Cash prizes, internships, and a chance to showcase your project at the Tech Summit. The flyer went on to list the rules. Team-based. No outside help. Submissions due in 2 weeks. The prize? A $500 scholarship, a 3-month internship at a local tech startup, and a chance to meet with top industry leaders. Zora felt a spark of excitement, quickly followed by doubt. She'd done coding projects before, on her own, for fun, when the world wasn't watching. But now, with the competition looming and everyone watching, it felt different. No. This could be my chance. This could be the one that matters. She put the phone down and went about her morning routine, but the thought of the competition buzzed in her head all day. At lunch, the art table had turned into the "let's talk about tech" table. Elijah was showing Tessa how to use an old-school programming language on his laptop. Miles was theorizing about AI and its implications for music production, and Danny, as always, was sketching up tech-related designs. Zora sat down and watched for a moment before speaking up. "I was thinking of entering that coding competition," she said, picking at her salad. The table went quiet. Tessa raised an eyebrow. "You code?" Zora's heart skipped. "I can code. A little." Elijah leaned back, studying her. "A little? Or a lot?" She hesitated, then said it. "A lot." He nodded slowly. "I've seen you design a website for that history project. You know what you're doing." Miles grinned. "Well, in that case, you have to do it. But what's your angle? What problem are you solving?" Zora felt a flush of heat. This was her moment. The competition could change everything, bring her the kind of recognition she didn't have to fight for. "I don't know yet. I'm going to figure it out." Danny grinned. "There's a whole universe of possibilities. But hey, let me know if you need a sketch for the project. I can make some cool design mock-ups." Zora smiled. "Thanks, I might take you up on that." It wasn't until she got home that the reality hit her. Her mom was gone at work, and the house felt too quiet. Zora opened her laptop, stared at the blank screen, and typed. "Problem to solve, underscore 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 dot." Then she stared. And stared. The truth was, Zora had always coded for herself, never with an audience in mind. Solving problems with her computer was a safe, private thing, a way to explore her curiosity without being under a microscope. Now, it felt like everything was on the line. This competition wasn't just about the project, it was about who she was. About how the world saw her. Her phone buzzed, dragging her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Elijah: "We should meet up after school. Talk ideas for the comp. Your place or mine?" Zora typed back quickly, "Yours is fine. I need a sounding board." At Elijah's house, the living room was a comfortable mess, piles of books, loose papers, and comic book references scattered everywhere. A quiet hum of music played from his laptop speakers as he pulled up the competition page. "We're going to need a solid idea," he said, tapping his pencil on the table. "But you don't need to make it world-changing. Just, useful. Practical." Zora nodded, staring at the screen. "What's something you deal with that needs a solution?" Elijah continued. "Think small, something that bugs you." Zora's mind raced. She thought of all the things in the world that frustrated her, but none seemed quite right. Then, her thoughts shifted. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from the school's social media account. The student body president had posted something. "The Innovators Challenge is going to be big. Hope everyone's ready to be impressed by Lincoln's brightest minds." She scrolled through the comments. Most were standard replies, enthusiastic, supportive. But then, one comment caught her eye. "Smartest girl in school entering. Could be a real showdown." Smirking face. It was from Dylan. Her stomach churned. She had no idea how Dylan had gotten wind of her interest in the competition, but somehow, the whole thing felt less like an opportunity and more like a gauntlet thrown at her feet. Elijah must have noticed the shift in her expression because he asked, "What's going on?" Zora put the phone down, trying to shake the unease. "Nothing. Just, people talking." Elijah tilted his head. "About what?" Zora hesitated. "Dylan's got it out for me. If he knows I'm entering, it's gonna be a whole thing. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he shrugged, leaning back in his chair. Well, I'd rather go down trying something new than never trying at all. Zora smiled faintly. Yeah. I guess you're right. Over the next few days, Zora's thoughts bounced between the project, the competition, and the growing weight of Dylan. She knew this wasn't just about coding anymore. This was about fitting in, about proving to herself and everyone else that she belonged. But it wasn't long before the whispers started. At lunch, she overheard two girls from her history class discussing the competition. Zora's totally entering, right? If she does, it's basically game over for anyone else. She's gonna make us all look dumb. I bet she's already working on the perfect project. Zora looked away, biting her lip. She couldn't escape it. And just like that, the competition had become something more than a test of skill, it was a battle for her very identity. Zora's phone buzzed again. It had become a regular rhythm, notifications, messages, reminders. But this time, it was a text from her mom. Just wanted to remind you to take care of yourself. Don't stress about everything. You're doing great. Love you. Zora stared at the message for a moment before locking her phone. It was the same message her mom always sent, encouraging, supportive. But somehow, in this moment, it only made her feel more isolated. Her mom was too far removed from the chaos of school life, too far from the whispers in the hallways, the side eyes at lunch, the people who saw Zora as nothing but a problem to be solved. She let out a shaky breath and grabbed her backpack. It was Tuesday, and she was already dreading the walk to school. The air felt heavier than usual, every step toward Lincoln High seemed to add more weight to her shoulders. At school, the morning was relatively quiet, people had their own things to focus on. Zora kept her head down, glancing occasionally at the students walking by. The gossip about her entry into the coding competition was still there, bubbling under the surface, but the real war had yet to begin. Then, as she made her way to her locker, she saw him. Dylan. He was standing with a group of students near the entrance, his usual smirk plastered across his face. Zora tried to walk past quickly, but then she heard his voice, calling out to her. Hey, Carter. You entering that little competition? His voice was laced with mockery, his tone sharp. Zora stopped in her tracks, unwilling to show weakness. She turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. Yeah, she said, trying to sound confident. What about it? Dylan laughed loudly. Oh, nothing. Just wanted to see if you could still get the answers right without making us all look bad. The group around him snickered. Zora's face flushed, but she didn't respond. She just turned and walked away, hoping her feet could carry her faster than her racing thoughts. That afternoon, Zora stayed in the library, trying to focus on the coding competition. She had already come up with an idea, something that could help students with their time management by building an app that organized assignments and deadlines based on priority. It was simple but practical, and that was the key. But even as she worked, she couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on her. Dylan's words replayed in her head, each time more biting than the last. She knew he was trying to provoke her, but it didn't make it hurt any less. Her mind kept drifting to the idea of fitting in. She didn't belong to the art kids, the jocks, or even the group of students who excelled at school without drawing attention. She was just different. And as much as she told herself that her intellect was a gift, it was becoming clearer that it was a burden too. By the end of the week, the social war had escalated. Students in the halls were starting to look at her differently, either with admiration or suspicion. She overheard snippets of conversation, hushed but full of venom. She thinks she's better than everyone. She's going to make all of us look dumb in that competition. Why's she always gotta be that girl? It wasn't enough that she was already in a battle with herself, now, she had to fight for her place in a world that felt like it didn't want her. She wasn't just fighting for a win in the coding competition, she was fighting for the chance to simply exist without being torn apart by the weight of her own brilliance. The next day, Elijah pulled her aside after lunch. "You okay?" he asked, his expression serious. "You've been quieter than usual." Zora sighed. "I'm fine. Just, trying to stay focused." "It's a lot." Elijah nodded, but he didn't seem convinced. "You've been getting a lot of attention. Some of it's good, but some of it's not. People are talking." "I know," Zora muttered. "And it's making it harder to think straight. I don't know how to handle all of this." Elijah paused for a moment, considering her words. Then he said something that surprised her. "I think you need to stop trying to handle it all. You're not alone in this." Zora raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" He gave her a small, half smile. "I'm in this with you. So is Tessa. Danny. We've got your back. We're not letting them tear you down just because you're smart." Zora looked at him, a mix of gratitude and wariness flooding her. "But what if it's not enough? What if they never stop?" Elijah's gaze softened. "Then we fight back. But not in the way they want us to." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, his smile turning into something a little more mischievous. "You'll see. Just wait." That afternoon, Zora sat in the library again, her laptop open and her mind struggling to focus. Elijah's words lingered, but the noise in her head drowned them out. The code she was writing felt harder than usual. Each line seemed to weigh heavier, the pressure to be perfect sinking deeper with every keystroke. Then, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a direct message from Tessa. "Don't let them get to you. If they want a fight, let's give it to them on our terms. You in?" Zora stared at the screen, her mind racing. She thought about the students who had made her feel small. She thought about Dylan's cruel words. She thought about how badly she just wanted to fit in. But something inside her shifted, just a little. She typed back. "Yeah. I'm in." That evening, she didn't code. She didn't work on the competition. Instead, she spent an hour drawing in her sketchbook, the old way. Her fingers moved fluidly across the page, and she could almost feel herself coming back to life as she sketched out a new concept for Nova Girl, the superhero that had been her secret all along. In a world full of people who tried to fit her into a box, Nova Girl was everything she couldn't be: bold, unapologetic, and impossible to ignore. Maybe it was time to stop hiding behind her code and start letting her own creation speak for itself. The week before the competition deadline felt like a whirlwind. The pressure to finish her project, deal with the social stress, and keep up with her schoolwork was becoming unbearable. Zora could feel her patience thinning with every passing day, every glance, every conversation that hinted at her being the genius outsider. And then, it happened. Zora was sitting at her desk at home, working on the final touches for her coding project. The clock showed 8:30 p.m., and she was still staring at the screen, her eyes bleary, mind scattered. She could hear the faint hum of the fridge downstairs, the soft tapping of the rain against her window. The world outside seemed so calm, so peaceful, but she felt anything but. A text from Elijah lit up her phone. "How's the project going? You need a break? We could all meet up tomorrow, talk some ideas." Zora hesitated for a moment. She wanted to say yes, wanted to hang out, get away from the pressure for just a little while. But then her thoughts returned to the competition. The looming deadline. Dylan's taunts. Her fear of failing. She was already too far in. "I'm fine. Just need to finish a few things." The text pinged back almost immediately, "Don't burn yourself out. You've got people who care, you know. Don't push away the people trying to help." Zora looked at the message, feeling a sharp pang in her chest. She didn't want to push anyone away. She just didn't know how to let anyone in without the whole world seeing her vulnerability. Her mom had always told her to keep her head high, to push through the tough times. And Zora always did, but now, it felt like it wasn't enough. She typed back, "Thanks, Elijah. I'll be okay." The next morning, Zora's mood was already on edge as she walked into school. The weight of her project was heavy on her shoulders, and she couldn't ignore the whispers following her everywhere. Dylan's words from earlier that week were still echoing in her mind, along with the rumors about her brilliance making everyone else look bad. Even Elijah's text couldn't shake the pressure she felt. In the halls, Zora tried to keep her head down, but her efforts were futile. She passed by a group of girls who snickered as they saw her, muttering just loud enough for her to hear. "Oh, look! The genius girl's here to save the day." Zora's stomach churned. She could feel the heat of their stares, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. If she stopped, if she acknowledged them, it would feel like admitting they were right, that she didn't belong. At lunch, she found a quiet corner in the library. Her phone buzzed again, and it was a message from Tessa. "You okay? You haven't been yourself lately." Zora glanced at the message inside. She didn't want to admit it. Didn't want to let anyone know how much the pressure was eating her alive. How every day felt like a battle she couldn't win. "I'm fine. Just stressed." But even as she typed it, she knew it wasn't true. She hadn't been fine for a long time. As she settled into her corner, trying to focus on her code, she noticed a group of students from the tech club walking by. They were talking about the competition, and Zora couldn't help but overhear. "Did you hear? Zora Carter's entering. She's like, too good at everything. I bet she's going to crush the competition. But, isn't it kind of unfair? She's already a genius." The word stung, though she didn't let it show. It wasn't the first time she'd heard people talk about her like she was some kind of monster they couldn't defeat. She wanted to yell out, to explain that she wasn't perfect, that she wasn't trying to make anyone feel inferior. But she knew it wouldn't change anything. It never did. The next class felt like an eternity. Every second dragged on, every moment heavier than the last. Zora could barely keep up with the lesson, her mind was elsewhere, scattered with thoughts of the competition and the tension it was causing. When the bell finally rang, signaling the end of the day, Zora packed her things quickly, desperate to escape the stifling air of the classroom. But as she passed the door, she froze. Dylan was leaning against the lockers, waiting for her. "Hey, genius," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "How's the project coming along? You about ready to show us all how much better you are than us?" Zora's heart skipped a beat. She forced herself to look him in the eye, but the weight of his words felt like a punch to her gut. He didn't care about her project, didn't care about her talent. This was about power. Control. Trying to make her feel small. "I'm not here for your games, Dylan," she said, her voice shaking, but steady. "I'm doing this for me, not for you." He laughed, stepping closer. "Sure, you keep telling yourself that. But don't be surprised if you fail. Not everyone's as perfect as you think you are." Zora's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, the world around her seemed to blur. She wanted to scream, to hit him, to do something, anything. But she just stood there, frozen, caught between the overwhelming need to defend herself and the crushing fear of failing. That night, after dinner, Zora sat at her desk again. The competition deadline was just 2 days away, and she still hadn't finished her project. She couldn't focus. Every time she tried, her mind was filled with Dylan's voice, the whispers, the pressure. Her phone buzzed again. It was a text from her mom. "Just checking in. You doing okay? Don't forget to breathe. Love you." Zora stared at the message, but it didn't offer the comfort she needed. She wanted to tell her mom everything, that the pressure was too much, that she couldn't handle being the genius anymore. But how could she? How could she admit that she felt broken when everyone else saw her as untouchable? With a frustrated sigh, Zora closed her laptop and pushed it aside. She needed a break. Needed to breathe. But as she stood up, her phone buzzed one last time. It was a message from Elijah. "I'm worried about you. I know you're feeling the pressure, but you're not alone in this. You've got us. Don't shut us out. Don't let this competition define you." Zora sat back down, the weight of his words settling over her like a blanket. "You've got us." For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Elijah was right. Maybe it wasn't about winning the competition or proving herself to anyone. Maybe it was about finding a way to stay true to who she was, without letting the world decide who she should be. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. Tomorrow was a new day. And no matter what happened with the competition, she wasn't going to let it break her. Not this time. Zora didn't sleep much that night. As she lay in bed, her mind raced through every possibility. The competition. Her classmates. Her project. The pressure. It all felt so overwhelming, like a heavy storm cloud hanging over her, blocking out the sun. She couldn't breathe under it anymore, couldn't see a way out. The weight of Dylan's words still echoed in her ears. Not everyone's as perfect as you think you are. How had she let herself be dragged down by that? By someone who had never even bothered to try to understand her. And yet, in a strange way, she understood him. She understood why he couldn't just let her be. Because she was everything he wasn't, confident, capable, unapologetic. Everything he could never be in his own twisted view of the world. But now, Zora was at a crossroads. The competition loomed closer than ever, but the idea of continuing to fight, to push through the pain, felt unbearable. She had to make a choice, and it couldn't just be about coding. It had to be about who she wanted to be. The next day, she skipped the usual routine of walking to school with Elijah and Tessa. Instead, she left early, walking the quiet streets alone, her feet echoing against the pavement with each step. It wasn't that she didn't want their company, it was that, for the first time, she needed to figure this out on her own. As she walked, she thought about what Elijah had said, "You've got us." But the question kept circling in her mind, did she? Could anyone really understand what it felt like to be so different? To carry the weight of expectations so high that it was impossible to breathe? When Zora arrived at school, she felt the familiar heaviness settle on her shoulders. The world was waiting for her to either succeed or fail. She couldn't avoid it any longer. But maybe avoiding the inevitable was exactly what she'd been doing all along. She made her way to the library, hoping to at least finish her project before the day spiraled into chaos. As she sat down at the table, a soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Hey, Zora. You doing okay?" Zora looked up to find Tessa standing by the table, her usual wide smile dimmed by concern. Zora didn't answer immediately. She didn't have the words. Tessa sat down across from her, her gaze soft but insistent. "You've been quiet. We're worried about you." Zora shook her head, setting her hands on her project, her fingers tightening against the keyboard. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Tessa didn't respond right away. She simply sat there, waiting for Zora to continue, to let the words spill out. "I thought I could handle it," Zora continued, her throat tight with emotion. "But I can't. It's like everyone's waiting for me to fail, and every time I try to keep going, it gets harder. And I don't know if it's worth it." Tessa nodded slowly. "You're right. It's not just about the competition. It's about everything else, isn't it?" Zora looked at her, her heart heavy. "Yeah. I feel like I'm drowning, Tessa. I keep pretending I'm fine, but I'm not. I'm not fine. I don't know who I am anymore." For a moment, Tessa didn't say anything. She simply reached across the table and placed a hand over Zora's. "You don't have to figure it all out right now. You just have to decide what you want. Not what everyone else wants. Not what the world expects of you. Zora stared at her hand for a moment, processing the words. The world. Expectations. They had been her whole life for so long, ever since she could remember. But now, the weight of it all felt unbearable. What if she wasn't supposed to follow the path everyone thought she should? What if the real challenge wasn't about being the smartest or the best, it was about finding out who she was without the pressure? After a long silence, Zora stood up. Tessa didn't follow, but her eyes never left Zora's face. I don't know what I'm doing, Zora said softly, almost as if she were talking to herself. But I can't keep pretending like I don't care. I know, Tessa said gently. But whatever you decide, we're here for you. That afternoon, Zora sat alone at her desk, her laptop open but untouched. The competition deadline was only hours away, but she felt no drive to finish. She couldn't. Not like this. Not while the world was still telling her who she should be. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, and for the first time in weeks, the silence felt different. It wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't empty. It was peaceful. Zora closed her laptop slowly. She had spent so much time trying to build something for everyone else, something that would earn their approval, prove them wrong, make them see her as more than just a freak. But it wasn't working. And she was tired of fighting a battle she didn't even want to win. She knew what she had to do. Later that night, Zora sat at the kitchen table, staring at the message she had just typed up on her phone. It wasn't a long message, but it held everything she needed to say. It was the end of a chapter, but also the beginning of something new. Hey, Mr. Johnson, I've been thinking about the competition. I've decided to withdraw. I've been pushing myself in a way that isn't healthy, and it's taking a toll on my mental health. I appreciate the opportunity, but I think it's time I focus on what's truly important to me. Thank you for understanding. With a deep breath, she hit send. The weight on her chest lifted almost immediately, and for the first time in weeks, Zora felt the slightest bit of peace. It wasn't the same kind of victory she had expected when she first signed up for the competition. But it felt real. It felt like her. The next day at school, Zora didn't walk with the heavy burden she'd carried for so long. When she saw Elijah and Tessa, they didn't ask about the competition. They didn't need to. They could tell by the look on her face that something had changed. She had made a decision, not to quit, but to live for herself. And as Zora looked at her friends, she realized that maybe this was the lesson she had needed all along, that she didn't have to prove anything to anyone. Not to Dylan. Not to the school. And certainly not to herself. She could just be. As she sat down at lunch, she took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, Zora felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. And that was enough. The days that followed Zora's decision were a mix of relief and uncertainty. She had let go of the competition, the one thing that had consumed her thoughts for so long, but there was still that lingering feeling of emptiness, the void left by months of chasing approval. Yet, in that emptiness, there was space for something new, something she hadn't allowed herself to consider before: freedom. Zora found herself walking the halls of the school with a different kind of confidence now. She still felt the eyes on her, the whispers that followed, but they didn't bother her as much. It was like she had finally stepped outside of the box everyone had tried to put her in. As the days passed, Zora started to pay more attention to the things she had been too distracted to notice before. She spent time in the library, not to work on a project but to read books she'd always wanted to dive into. She sat outside on the grass during lunch, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin and the wind through her hair. And, most importantly, she began to really listen to her friends, Elijah, Tessa, and even some of the students she had ignored in the past. She had never realized how much she had missed out on, focusing all her energy on something that didn't define her, didn't shape her future the way she had thought it would. One afternoon, while walking through the school courtyard, Zora was surprised to see Elijah sitting on a bench, his laptop open in front of him. He looked up as she approached, his face lighting up with that familiar warm smile. "Hey! You're out here today?" he said, motioning for her to sit next to him. "Yeah," Zora replied with a small smile. "Figured I'd get some fresh air. Haven't done that in a while." Elijah nodded. "You know, I've been meaning to ask. What are you going to do now? I mean, with the competition over." Zora paused. She hadn't really thought about what came next. It was still so new, this feeling of freedom. But then something clicked inside her, a sense of direction she hadn't realized she was craving. "I've been thinking a lot about it," she said, her voice steady. "I've been so focused on what everyone else wanted me to do, what I thought I should do, but now I just want to focus on things that make me happy. Like, what I'm passionate about. And I've realized that I don't have to be the best to be happy. I just need to be myself." Elijah nodded, his eyes sparkling with understanding. "That's exactly what I've been trying to tell you. You're enough as you are. The genius thing, the competition, it's all just noise. What really matters is what you want." Zora's heart lightened at his words. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that. She had spent so much time trying to fit into a mold, trying to prove that she was more than just her intelligence. But in doing so, she had almost lost touch with the very thing that made her unique in the first place, her ability to think, to create, to dream, on her own terms. The next day, Zora walked into class, feeling a bit nervous but also excited. She had made the decision to drop the competition, but there was still the matter of her future. She couldn't let her self-doubt keep her from pursuing what she loved. It was in her history class that Zora received the first sign that she was on the right path. Mrs. Green, the history teacher, asked the class to form groups for a new project, a creative endeavor that involved both research and presentation. It wasn't the same type of project as the tech competition, but it was an opportunity for Zora to stretch her wings, to work with others without the weight of perfectionism holding her back. She was paired with a few students she hadn't interacted with much, and as they discussed their ideas for the project, Zora felt something unexpected, a spark of excitement. This wasn't about impressing anyone or showing off her intellect. It was about collaborating, creating something new together. After class, Zora found herself walking with Tessa. They chatted about the project, and Tessa asked the question Zora hadn't even thought to ask herself yet. "So, what are you thinking after school? Do you have any big plans for your future?" Zora thought about it for a moment. For so long, her future had been mapped out for her, dictated by everyone else's expectations. But now, the road ahead was wide open, and she could go wherever she wanted. "I'm not really sure yet," Zora admitted, shrugging. "I guess I'll keep doing what I love. I've always liked technology, coding, and even art. But I don't need to decide right now. I've got time to figure it out." Tessa smiled, her eyes full of warmth. "That's a good attitude. You're not in a race. Take your time, explore what you love, and see where it takes you. You've got a whole future ahead of you." Zora felt lighter. She had been so caught up in the idea of having everything figured out that she hadn't allowed herself the freedom to just live in the moment. To enjoy the process of discovering herself without rushing to meet someone else's timeline. A few days later, Zora sat in the library, working on her history project with her group. As she brainstormed ideas and bounced thoughts off her classmates, she realized how much she had grown. She was no longer the isolated girl who tried to outrun her emotions or hide behind her intelligence. She was someone who could collaborate, share ideas, and trust herself in ways she hadn't thought possible. Her group worked well together, and by the end of the session, Zora felt a sense of accomplishment, not because she had done everything on her own, but because she had contributed to something greater than herself. As she walked home that afternoon, Zora felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. She wasn't the genius everyone expected her to be. She wasn't the quiet, withdrawn girl who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. She was just Zora, a person who loved to learn, to create, and to grow. And for the first time, she was okay with that. The weeks that followed saw Zora embracing her new path. She didn't jump into any new projects or commitments right away. Instead, she focused on rediscovering the things she loved outside of school, the things she had forgotten in the chaos of trying to please everyone. She started attending art classes at a local community center. She spent hours sketching, creating things from her imagination, and expressing herself through a medium she had always enjoyed but never had time for. She also took more interest in coding, but now, it wasn't about proving herself to anyone. It was about her own curiosity, her own desire to build something meaningful. One evening, Zora found herself sitting with Elijah and Tessa at their usual spot in the park. They were talking about their future plans, laughing, and enjoying the moment. Zora didn't feel the need to explain herself anymore. She didn't need to justify her choices or her journey. She was here, in this moment, with people who accepted her for exactly who she was. And that was enough. The days following Zora's decision to embrace her own path had been freeing, but they weren't without their challenges. There were still moments where she questioned her choices, wondering if she was making a mistake by stepping away from everything she thought was important. The pressure to succeed, to stand out, was still there, lurking in the background, but it was quieter now. The louder voices had finally softened. Now, it was time to rebuild, to reconnect with people she had pushed away and to open herself up to new relationships, ones built on trust and shared understanding, not just on performance and achievement. One afternoon, Zora was walking through the school courtyard when she noticed a familiar face standing near the vending machines. It was Dylan. He was alone, staring at the snacks with a bored expression, his hands in his pockets. Zora felt a strange mix of emotions at the sight of him. On one hand, she didn't want to deal with him, especially not after everything that had happened. On the other hand, there was a part of her that wanted to finally clear the air. To understand what had driven him to treat her the way he had. She had never been one to back away from a challenge, so why should this be any different? Taking a deep breath, she walked over to him, her heart pounding a little faster than usual. "Hey, Dylan," she said, her voice steady. Dylan turned, surprise flashing across his face. He didn't say anything for a moment, clearly caught off guard. But then, his expression softened, and he nodded slightly. "Zora. Didn't expect to see you," he muttered, his voice almost sounding apologetic. Zora hesitated, unsure how to approach him. He hadn't exactly been friendly, or even civil, when they'd last spoken. But maybe that was the point. She didn't need him to apologize, she just needed to have this conversation, to lay things out on the table. "I wanted to talk to you," she began, her gaze steady. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. And I just want to know why you've been so hostile." Dylan's expression shifted, a mix of guilt and frustration in his eyes. "I don't know," he said, rubbing his neck. "I guess I've just been angry. Angry at myself mostly." Zora raised an eyebrow, not expecting that response. "Angry at yourself? For what?" Dylan sighed, looking down at his feet. "I don't know, Zora. I guess I'm not used to seeing someone so perfect. You were always ahead of everyone else, always getting the praise. And it pissed me off. I didn't want to admit that maybe I was just jealous. That you could do all these things and still have everything go your way." Zora blinked, taken aback by his honesty. She had never expected him to admit something like that, especially after everything that had happened between them. "I didn't mean to make you feel that way," she said quietly. "I never wanted to compete with anyone. I don't know how to be anything but myself." Dylan looked up at her, his expression softening. "I get that now. It just took me a while to realize it." There was an awkward silence between them for a moment. Zora didn't know what to say, and Dylan seemed equally unsure. But somehow, they had bridged the gap between them. The walls that had once separated them were starting to crumble. "I'm not perfect, you know," Zora finally said, her voice a little more vulnerable than she had intended. "I've made mistakes. A lot of them." Dylan nodded, offering a small, tentative smile. "Yeah, I've figured that out. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't all have to be perfect all the time." Zora smiled back, feeling the weight of the conversation lift. Maybe. The next day, Zora met with Elijah and Tessa after school. They were sitting on the steps of the building, talking about the upcoming weekend when Zora decided to tell them about her conversation with Dylan. "You'll never guess who I talked to today," she began, a mix of surprise and amusement in her voice. Tessa raised an eyebrow. "Dylan?" Zora nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Yeah. I don't know what came over me, but I just walked up to him and asked why he'd been so hostile." Elijah looked impressed. "And what did he say?" "He said he was angry because he was jealous," Zora replied, her tone soft. "He admitted it. I didn't expect that at all." Tessa laughed lightly. "Wow. That's a huge step." Zora nodded. "Yeah, it is. I don't think we're friends or anything, but at least it's less awkward now." Elijah grinned. "That's good. Maybe you two could work things out, eventually." Zora didn't answer right away. She wasn't sure if she wanted to be friends with Dylan. But it felt like something had shifted. Maybe they would never be close, but at least they could coexist without that animosity between them. That was enough for now. The days that followed were filled with more subtle changes. Zora found herself talking more to students she hadn't noticed before, people she had once dismissed as too different, too far removed from her world. But now, she realized, they weren't so different after all. They all had their own struggles, their own dreams, and maybe, just maybe, they could connect over something other than their differences. One afternoon, she found herself sitting with a girl named Mia from her art class. Mia was quiet, with long, dark hair and a shy smile. They had barely spoken before, but when they found themselves sitting next to each other in the library, they started to talk. "You're really good at art," Zora said, glancing at Mia's sketchbook. "I didn't know you were into drawing." Mia smiled shyly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Yeah, it's something I've always loved. But I've never really been good at showing it to people." Zora leaned forward, intrigued. "I get that. I've always been more into coding and tech stuff, but lately, I've been getting back into art, too." Mia's eyes widened in surprise. "Really? That's awesome. What kind of stuff do you draw?" Zora grinned. "Mostly random stuff, abstract stuff, designs that don't really mean anything. But I love it. It feels like a way to express things I can't say out loud." Mia nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "I feel the same way. It's like the pencil knows what I'm thinking when I can't put it into words." Zora smiled, feeling the connection between them. For the first time in a long while, she realized how easy it was to build bridges with people when she wasn't holding on to the past, when she wasn't caught up in expectations or judgments. As she walked home later that afternoon, Zora thought about all the small moments of connection she had experienced over the past week. Talking to Dylan, sitting with Mia, having conversations with Elijah and Tessa that weren't focused on her achievements, it was all starting to feel more natural, more like the person she wanted to be. Maybe, Zora thought, that was what she had been missing all along, the ability to connect without the weight of perfectionism dragging her down. Maybe, just maybe, that was the true meaning of success. It had been a few weeks since Zora had started making changes in her life. She had finally embraced the idea that she didn't need to prove herself to anyone. She could simply be Zora, intelligent, creative, and passionate, but also imperfect, like everyone else. The weight of competition, of expectation, had lifted, but with it came a strange sort of emptiness. There were still things she wanted to achieve, challenges she wanted to face. But this time, she wasn't doing it to show off or to win approval. She wanted to challenge herself. It was one of those quiet Saturday mornings when Zora had an idea. She had been sitting at her desk, sketching ideas for a new art project when the thought hit her: what if she could combine everything she loved? What if she could take her love for technology, art, and coding and turn it into something that challenged her, not for anyone else, but for herself? She had heard about a new competition for young developers to create art using coding and technology, something called Digital Art Innovators. Zora knew she had the skills to pull it off, but it wasn't the competition she was interested in. What fascinated her was the concept: blending art with technology, creating something that could express emotions through both design and code. It was a perfect challenge, a way to push her boundaries without the pressure of competing against others. The next day, she brought the idea to Elijah and Tessa during lunch. "I've been thinking," Zora began, glancing between them as they both looked up from their sandwiches. "There's this competition coming up, but it's not like the usual ones. It's about using technology and coding to create digital art. I want to try it." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "Digital art? That's an interesting mix. But I thought you didn't want to do anything with competitions anymore." Zora smiled, shaking her head. "It's not about the competition. It's about trying something new. It's about me pushing my own boundaries, not for a trophy, but because I think I could learn something valuable from it." Tessa nodded slowly, her lips curling into a supportive smile. "I get it. You want a challenge, but on your own terms. I think that's awesome, Zora." Zora felt a rush of relief. It was rare that she didn't feel like she had to explain herself to Elijah or Tessa. They just got it. "I'm going to give it a shot," Zora continued, her voice steady. "I'll design something that combines my love for technology and my art. But this time, it's just for me. No pressure, no need for approval. Just a chance to see where I can take it." The next few days were filled with both excitement and frustration. Zora started sketching ideas on paper, brainstorming how to incorporate coding with visual art. It wasn't easy. Every time she thought she had something, she felt like she could push it further, add another layer, improve the design, make it more complex. But there was no rush. This time, it was all about the process. She spent hours in the library and at home, researching the best coding techniques for digital art, learning how to manipulate shapes and colors in ways she'd never thought possible. The coding side was tricky, but it wasn't the coding that frustrated her, it was the balance. How could she create something that felt emotionally resonant but also technically innovative? One night, after an entire evening spent debugging her code, Zora found herself staring at the screen. The image on her monitor was simple: a series of shifting geometric shapes and patterns. It was beautiful, she thought, but not quite what she had in mind. It was too rigid, too calculated. Art wasn't supposed to be perfect, it was supposed to evoke something: feeling, emotion, life. Frustrated, Zora pushed away from her desk and walked to her window. The cool night air rushed in as she opened it, and she stared out at the moonlit sky. Her mind began to wander. Maybe that was the problem: she had been trying to control everything. Art wasn't about control, it was about exploration. The realization hit her hard. It wasn't about creating something perfect. It was about learning through the process. It was okay to make mistakes. It was okay for things to be messy, to feel incomplete. That was what made them real, and that was what made them beautiful. The next day, she started fresh. This time, she didn't focus so much on getting everything right. She let the shapes move freely on the screen, adjusting them with her code, but allowing them to have their own rhythm. She added in bursts of color, watching as they blended and clashed, as patterns appeared and disappeared in a fluid dance of light and form. There was something captivating about it, something raw. By the end of the day, Zora had created a piece that felt different than anything she had done before. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive, in a way that her earlier designs hadn't been. It reflected the chaos of her thoughts, the messiness of her emotions, and the beauty of letting go. "Hey, Zora," That looks amazing," Elijah said when he saw the piece later that week. He was sitting at her desk, his eyes wide as he took in the visual display. Zora grinned, feeling a sense of pride she hadn't expected. "It's not finished yet, but I think I'm finally on the right track." "You're definitely onto something," Elijah said, his voice full of genuine admiration. "It's different from anything I've seen. You're mixing technology and art in a way that feels, well, alive. Like it's not just some static image. It moves, it changes. It's dynamic." Zora felt a wave of relief wash over her. She hadn't made the piece for anyone else's approval, but hearing Elijah's words made her realize how far she had come. This was about her own growth, her own challenge. It wasn't about being the best, it was about exploring her passions and pushing herself to create something unique. The following week saw Zora continue to work on her digital art project, fine-tuning the code, experimenting with new ideas, and letting the process unfold. It was the first time she had ever worked on something without the burden of competition, and it felt freeing. She was learning, creating, and growing without the pressure to outperform anyone else. When the deadline for the Digital Art Innovators competition arrived, Zora was nervous but excited. She wasn't expecting to win. She wasn't even sure if her piece would be accepted. But for the first time, she didn't care. She had already won by challenging herself, by stepping out of her comfort zone and discovering a new side of herself. The results came in 2 weeks later. Zora's piece had won first place in the digital art category. But as she read the email, her heart wasn't racing like it used to. She wasn't jumping up and down with excitement. Instead, she felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had done something for herself. And that, she realized, was worth more than any trophy. That night, as she stood in front of her computer, staring at the notification on her screen, Zora smiled to herself. She had learned something important: true growth wasn't about winning or achieving the highest status. It was about pushing yourself beyond what you thought was possible, facing challenges that forced you to grow, and being okay with the fact that success came in many forms. And for the first time, Zora truly understood that success wasn't defined by a competition or anyone else's expectations. It was defined by the journey. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Zora woke up to a crisp fall morning, the air fresh and full of possibility. The sunlight streamed in through her window, casting a warm golden glow over her room. It was a new day, and for the first time in a long while, Zora felt a calm certainty within her, a certainty that came not from external validation or accolades, but from within. The win in the Digital Art Innovators competition had been a turning point for her, but it wasn't the award that mattered. It was the realization that she could do anything she set her mind to, not because others believed in her, but because she believed in herself. The previous few weeks had been transformative for Zora. The competition had been a challenge, yes, but it had also pushed her to take risks and try things she'd never considered before. And now, after weeks of self-reflection and growth, she realized that the most important lesson wasn't just about skill or intellect. It was about self-belief. She didn't need to compete with anyone else. She didn't need to prove her worth. The only person she needed to answer to was herself. As she walked to school that morning, Zora thought about all the times she had doubted herself in the past. Back when she had been obsessed with perfection, constantly seeking approval from others, her classmates, her teachers, even her family. She had been caught in a cycle of self-criticism, unsure of her own value unless others affirmed it. But that was over now. Zora had started to realize that the key to overcoming her doubts wasn't about achieving success to impress others. It was about trusting herself and knowing that no matter the outcome, she was capable, worthy, and enough just as she was. When she arrived at school, Zora's thoughts were still on the competition. The recognition had felt nice, but it wasn't the recognition itself that had mattered. It was the feeling of being fully present in the moment, the satisfaction of creating something true to herself. It had taken courage to share her work with others, not because it was perfect, but because it was hers. As she walked through the hallways, she noticed people looking at her differently. It wasn't the usual curious stares she'd grown accustomed to, it was something more. It was respect. She could feel it in the way they looked at her, more like a peer than an outsider. It was a shift, and for the first time, Zora realized that the way people saw her had changed because she had changed. It wasn't just about the artwork anymore, it was about the confidence she carried with her. She wasn't trying to be anyone else. She was simply Zora. Later that day, Zora found herself standing in front of her locker, deep in thought when she heard someone call her name. Zora, hey. She turned to see Mia, the quiet girl from her art class, approaching her with a big smile on her face. Mia had been one of the first people to recognize her talent in digital art, and since then, the two had bonded over their shared love of creativity and exploration. I wanted to tell you, Mia said, her voice filled with excitement, I saw your project in the competition. It was amazing, Zora. I really think it could change the way people look at art and technology. You really pushed the boundaries. Zora felt a warm rush of gratitude. Thanks, Mia. That means a lot to me. Mia smiled, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. I think you could do even more. You should consider taking it further, maybe collaborating with other artists or developers. You've got the skills, and now you've got the confidence to back it up. Zora was taken aback. No one had ever suggested anything like that before. Sure, she had always been driven by the desire to excel, but the idea of truly collaborating, of reaching beyond her comfort zone and expanding her creative network, was new. She hadn't thought about pushing her work in that direction, but now that Mia mentioned it, the idea began to take root. I've never really thought about collaboration like that, Zora admitted. But it could be cool to work with other people who see things differently. Maybe it would help me grow even more. Mia nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. Sometimes, stepping out of your own head and working with others brings out the best in you. Don't be afraid to ask for help or bounce ideas off people. You never know where it could lead. Zora smiled, the possibilities swirling in her mind. She felt a surge of excitement. Mia's words had unlocked something inside her, something she hadn't expected to feel today. Maybe it was time to take her work to the next level, maybe it was time to collaborate, to reach out to others who shared her passion. As the week went on, Zora couldn't shake the idea of collaboration. She had always worked alone, thinking that she had to do everything herself. But Mia's suggestion had planted a seed, and it began to grow. What if she could take her passion for digital art and combine it with other people's strengths? What if she could work alongside others who brought different perspectives, different talents to the table? The more she thought about it, the more the idea felt like the right next step. It wasn't about abandoning her own vision. It was about expanding it, stretching it to places she couldn't have reached alone. That Friday, Zora found herself walking toward the school's computer lab after school hours, a sense of purpose in her step. She had decided to take the first step toward collaboration by reaching out to Elijah and Tessa. She hadn't told them much about the idea yet, but now, she was ready to share it with them. She wasn't sure where it would lead, but she felt a strong pull toward the idea of creating something bigger, something more than just her own individual work. Elijah was sitting at one of the computers when Zora walked in, his headphones around his neck. Tessa was next to him, both of them absorbed in a game on the screen. Hey, Zora. Elijah greeted her, pausing the game. What's up? I've been thinking, Zora began, her voice a little tentative at first. About the digital art thing. I want to try something new, something bigger. I want to collaborate with you too, if you're interested. Tessa looked intrigued. Collaborate? What do you have in mind? I was thinking we could create a digital art project together, Zora explained, feeling a spark of excitement in her chest. Not just something on my own, but something where we all bring our strengths to the table. Elijah, you're great with tech stuff, and Tessa, you've got the creativity and design skills. I think we could make something really cool if we work together." Elijah smiled. "That sounds like a lot of fun, actually. I've never done anything like that before." Tessa nodded, her eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "I'm in. Let's do it." Zora felt a rush of energy as they began brainstorming ideas, excited by the thought of what they could create together. For the first time, she felt like she had found her tribe, not just people who would appreciate her work, but people who would help her grow, challenge her, and push her beyond her limits. The next few weeks were filled with creative exploration and collaboration. Zora had never felt so alive, so inspired. Each day, she looked forward to working with Elijah and Tessa, each of them bringing something new and exciting to the project. It wasn't just about creating something beautiful, it was about sharing ideas, learning from each other, and building something that none of them could have done alone. And with each passing day, Zora realized that the power of self-belief wasn't just about trusting herself, it was about believing in the strength of the connections she could make, the ways she could grow by working alongside others. She wasn't alone in this world. And that made all the difference. The weeks following the collaboration project with Elijah and Tessa were transformative for Zora. The digital art piece they created together, a vibrant, interactive piece that blended code with intricate visual designs, had garnered a lot of attention. But it wasn't the recognition that mattered. What stood out to Zora was the deepening sense of connection with others. For the first time, she wasn't hiding behind her work or isolating herself. She was part of something bigger, a team, a shared vision. Zora had spent so many years building walls around herself, keeping her genius a secret and using it only to stay ahead. But now, with Elijah and Tessa by her side, she was starting to see the value of breaking down those barriers. Not just with them, but with everyone else in her life. It was a chilly Wednesday afternoon when Zora walked into the school cafeteria, her usual seat at the back corner now feeling foreign. She had always preferred the solitude, the quiet that came from sitting apart from everyone else. But today, as she scanned the room, she realized something: she no longer wanted to sit alone. She spotted Mia at a table near the middle of the cafeteria, chatting animatedly with a few other students. Mia's laughter rang out, and Zora felt a tug of curiosity. It had been a while since she'd taken the time to get to know people outside of Elijah and Tessa. Maybe it was time to try again, to step out of her self-imposed isolation. With a deep breath, Zora walked toward the table. Mia spotted her first and waved enthusiastically. "Zora! Hey, come join us!" Mia called. Zora hesitated for a moment, her nerves bubbling up. But something inside her urged her forward. She had worked so hard to break free of her old patterns, to challenge herself, to push beyond what was comfortable. So, with a small smile, she sat down next to Mia. "Hey, Mia," Zora greeted, feeling a bit awkward but also hopeful. "How's it going?" Mia's eyes lit up. "It's going great. We were just talking about the art project, everyone's really impressed by what you did. I'm telling you, Zora, you've got something special. You should totally consider showing your work at the school's art exhibition next month. It could be a great way to get more people to see your talent." Zora's cheeks flushed. It wasn't the first time she'd heard someone compliment her work, but something about Mia's words made her pause. This wasn't just an acknowledgement of her skill, it was an invitation to step further out of her shell and into the light. "I don't know," Zora said, her voice faltering slightly. "I've always kept my stuff to myself. I'm not sure I'm ready for that." Mia leaned in, her tone encouraging. "Zora, you're more than ready. It's about time people saw the real you, don't you think? You're not just some quiet genius, you're someone who's got a story to tell. People want to hear it." Later that afternoon, Zora found herself walking down the hallway, her thoughts spinning. Mia's words echoed in her mind. She had always kept her genius to herself, hiding it away because she feared how others would react. She feared that if she exposed too much of herself, her ideas, her creativity, she'd become vulnerable. She'd been told her whole life that her intelligence and uniqueness were things to be guarded, not shared. But as she walked, something shifted inside her. She had spent too long believing that being alone was safer. That staying distant was easier. But the truth was, staying isolated had only held her back. It had kept her from connecting with the people who cared about her, from sharing her gifts with the world. The truth was, she was ready to break down those walls, both the ones she had built around her heart and the ones that kept her from fully engaging with those around her. The following week, Zora made the decision to submit her work to the school's art exhibition. She felt a sense of nervous excitement as she filled out the application form, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The fear still lingered, the fear of being judged, of not being good enough, of exposing herself to criticism. But she pushed it aside. She wasn't doing this for approval anymore. She was doing it for herself. She clicked submit, and for the first time in a long time, Zora felt like she was standing on the edge of something new. The exhibition night arrived faster than Zora expected. The school gymnasium had been transformed into a gallery of sorts, with rows of tables and easels displaying student artwork. The room buzzed with activity as students, teachers, and parents filtered in, chatting and admiring the pieces. Zora stood near the back of the room, her heart pounding in her chest as she waited for people to start noticing her work. Elijah and Tessa had been supportive from the very beginning, standing by her side as she nervously adjusted the digital display of her project. They had come with her, of course, to offer moral support. Tessa gave her a reassuring smile. "You've got this," Tessa said, her voice full of confidence. "No matter what happens tonight, you're already winning. You've come so far." Zora nodded, her throat tight. "I know. I don't know how people will react. I've never shown anyone something like this before." Elijah clapped her on the back. "If anyone can wow them, it's you. Don't forget that." As the crowd began to grow, Zora's nerves intensified. She had been so caught up in her own head for so long, avoiding these types of situations, but now she was here. She had done it. She had taken the first step toward letting others in. And the more she looked around, the more she realized that the only way to move forward was by continuing to let people in. The moment finally came. A group of students approached her work, whispering excitedly. Zora watched, a little detached, as they admired the intricate patterns of color shifting across the screen, the way the shapes seemed to react to their movements, responding to touch with new layers of meaning. They were fascinated, not just by the art itself, but by the story behind it. And for the first time in her life, Zora felt something unexpected: pride. As the night wore on, she was approached by teachers, classmates, even parents who wanted to learn more about her process, her inspirations, and her future plans. She felt herself opening up, sharing not just her work but her thoughts and ideas, too. She was no longer hiding behind her achievements, she was standing tall in the light, sharing herself authentically with the world. By the end of the night, Zora's piece had won Best in Show, but the trophy in her hands felt almost irrelevant. What mattered most was the transformation she had gone through in front of everyone. She had broken the barriers she had once built, and in doing so, she had unlocked a new sense of belonging, not just in the world of art and technology, but in her own life. For the first time, Zora realized that her genius wasn't a burden to hide. It was a gift to share. And in sharing it, she could build connections, open doors, and be seen, not for the labels others placed on her, but for the person she was becoming. The morning after the art exhibition, Zora woke up feeling different. For the first time in a long while, the weight that had once hung over her chest, of fear, self-doubt, and isolation, felt lighter. The validation from the exhibition, the recognition she had received, was satisfying, yes, but it wasn't what had caused the shift inside her. It was something deeper, something more permanent. It was the realization that she had stepped into a new version of herself. She had stopped hiding, stopped fearing judgment, and had allowed her true potential to shine. Zora walked to school that morning with a new sense of purpose. The air felt clearer, her steps more confident. The conversations she had with Mia, Elijah, Tessa, and even her classmates after the exhibition had helped her see things in a new light. It wasn't just about her skills as an artist or the applause she had received. It was about opening up, sharing her journey, and connecting with others on a deeper level. Her thoughts were interrupted when she reached the entrance of the school. She spotted a familiar face, Mr. Bennett, the art teacher, who had been a quiet but steady presence throughout her artistic journey. He was standing near the doors, holding something in his hand, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Zora, good morning," Mr. Bennett greeted her, stepping forward. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," Zora replied, her curiosity piqued. "What's up?" He smiled, clearly pleased. "I just wanted to say congratulations on the exhibition. Your work was truly impressive. But more than that, I think you're on the verge of something big, Zora. You've got talent, but you've also got the drive to do something meaningful with it." Zora blushed, feeling a rush of warmth at his words. "Thanks, Mr. Bennett. That means a lot." He looked at her with a kind, but focused expression. "I wanted to talk to you about something. There's an opportunity coming up, a summer internship at an art and technology lab downtown. They're looking for talented students to help develop new projects in the field of digital art, and I think you'd be a perfect fit." Zora's heart skipped a beat. The idea of an internship, of working in a professional environment, contributing to real-world projects, was both exhilarating and terrifying. "I don't know, Mr. Bennett," she said hesitantly. "It sounds amazing, but I'm not sure if I'm ready for something like that. I mean, what if I mess up?" Mr. Bennett's expression softened. "Zora, this is your chance to push yourself, to explore new horizons. It's normal to be scared when you're stepping into the unknown, but it's exactly the kind of challenge that will help you grow. You've already proven you have what it takes. This internship could be the next step in your journey. You'll never know unless you try." Zora stood there, processing his words. She had been avoiding opportunities like this for years, terrified that she wasn't ready, that she would fall short. But something inside her had changed. She had already taken the first step out of her comfort zone by submitting her art to the exhibition. Could she do the same with this internship? Could she embrace this new challenge and take her talents to places she had never imagined? As she walked through the halls of the school later that day, Zora couldn't stop thinking about the internship. The idea of working with professionals, exploring new possibilities in digital art, felt like an incredible opportunity. But it also felt intimidating. She had always worked alone, kept her talents private, and now she was being offered the chance to collaborate with experts, to step into a world that felt bigger than anything she had ever known. Zora sat down in the lunchroom, staring at her lunch without really seeing it. Her mind was elsewhere, on the internship, on the possibility of taking her work to a professional level. She didn't know anyone who had done something like this before, and the thought of it filled her with a mix of excitement and fear. "Zora, you look like you're thinking a mile a minute," Elijah said, pulling up a chair next to her. He had a knowing look on his face, as though he could sense her inner turmoil. Zora glanced up at him. "It's this internship opportunity. Mr. Bennett mentioned it to me this morning, and I'm not sure if I'm ready. I mean, it's a huge step." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "You've been ready for this since the moment you showed your work at the exhibition. You've got the talent, Zora. And more importantly, you've got the heart to make something meaningful. Don't let fear hold you back." Zora smiled, feeling grateful for his words. She had always valued Elijah's perspective. He had a way of seeing things with clarity, of pushing her to take chances. "I don't know, what if I mess up?" Zora asked again, her voice tinged with doubt. "Mistakes are part of the process," Elijah said simply. "No one's perfect. But you'll learn, and that's what matters. Don't let your fear of making a mistake keep you from going after something amazing. You're not alone in this, Zora. You've got people who support you, who believe in you. Zora felt a surge of warmth in her chest. Elijah's words echoed in her mind, and she realized that he was right. She had been so focused on avoiding failure that she had never truly given herself the chance to succeed. She had spent so many years playing it safe, not stepping up to opportunities because she was afraid of what might happen. But this internship, this was a chance for something bigger, something more meaningful. That night, Zora sat down at her desk, the application for the internship open on her screen. She stared at the blank form, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. For a long time, she hesitated. What if she wasn't ready? What if she wasn't good enough? But as she thought back to everything she had learned in the past few months, the lessons of self-belief, the encouragement from her friends and mentors, she realized that these doubts were just a part of the process. She didn't need to have all the answers. She didn't need to be perfect. What mattered was that she was willing to try. With a deep breath, Zora began to type, her fingers moving confidently over the keys. She wrote about her passion for digital art, about the work she had created, and about how much this internship meant to her. She didn't try to sound perfect or polished. She just wrote from the heart. When she finished, she clicked submit. And for the first time in a long time, Zora felt a deep sense of peace. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew that she had taken another step forward. She had stepped into the unknown, and that was exactly where she needed to be. The next morning, Zora woke up to an email notification on her phone. It was from the internship program. She hesitated for a moment before opening it. Her heart raced as she read through the message. Dear Zora, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for our summer internship program. We were impressed with your portfolio and believe you have the potential to make a significant impact in the field of digital art. We look forward to working with you and helping you grow as an artist and a creator. Zora's breath caught in her throat. Her hands shook as she read the email again, a wide smile spreading across her face. She had done it. She had taken the leap, and now, she was stepping into a new world of possibilities. The week before the internship started, Zora could barely contain her excitement. It had been a dream of hers to work in a professional environment, to see how her passion for digital art could blend with real-world projects. The internship at the Art and Technology Lab downtown wasn't just a career opportunity, it felt like a step toward shaping her future, toward finding her place in a world where her creativity could truly thrive. On the first day, Zora woke up early, her nerves buzzing with anticipation. She had laid out her clothes the night before, a simple yet sleek black dress paired with a blazer, perfect for making a good impression. She glanced at herself in the mirror, adjusting her glasses and smoothing her hair back into a neat ponytail. The person staring back at her was someone she didn't fully recognize yet. She had spent years hiding behind her talent, afraid to show too much of herself to others. But now, she was stepping into this new world with all her vulnerabilities and strengths. Zora's mom, noticing her anxious energy as she prepared to leave, gave her a quick hug before she headed out the door. You've got this, Zora. You're going to make a great impression. Just remember to be yourself and keep learning. I will, Mom. Thanks, Zora replied, a tight smile on her face. As she walked out the door and into the unknown, she felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. This was the next chapter of her life, and she was ready to face it head-on. When Zora arrived at the lab, it was everything she had hoped for and more. The building was sleek and modern, filled with open spaces, glass walls, and workstations brimming with cutting-edge technology. As she stepped inside, she was greeted by Sarah, the internship coordinator, who led her to the rest of the team. Zora, welcome. We're excited to have you here, Sarah said warmly. I'm Sarah, and I'll be guiding you through the internship. Everyone else is in the main studio, let's get you settled in. The studio was filled with creative energy. Several interns sat at computers, their screens displaying vibrant pieces of digital art, motion graphics, and complex coding. The walls were adorned with large prints of abstract digital landscapes, blending traditional art with technology in ways Zora had only dreamed of. The air was electric with possibility. Zora took a seat at one of the workstations and began to unpack her things. As she looked around, she couldn't help but feel a wave of doubt wash over her. She had never worked in such a high-tech environment, and everyone here seemed so confident in their abilities. The pressure to prove herself felt heavier than ever. Just then, Sarah came over with a warm smile. "I know it can be a lot to take in at first, but you're here for a reason, Zora. You have the talent. Now it's about honing your skills and collaborating with the team. Don't worry about fitting in, just focus on doing your best." Zora nodded, grateful for Sarah's reassurance. "Thanks. I'll do my best." The first few days were overwhelming but exciting. Zora quickly realized that this was a whole new world, a world where her skills were both tested and pushed to new limits. She worked closely with her fellow interns, collaborating on various projects, ranging from developing augmented reality installations to designing interactive digital sculptures. Every task she was assigned challenged her to think outside the box, to apply her coding skills in ways she hadn't before. At first, Zora struggled. The work was more complex than anything she had done before, and there were moments when she doubted her abilities. She had always been a solo artist, someone who thrived in her own space, creating in her own time. But here, she was part of a team, and the stakes were higher. Every project was a collaborative effort, every decision subject to critique and feedback. One day, after a particularly tough brainstorming session, Zora found herself sitting alone in the break room, nursing a cup of coffee. She had felt out of her depth all day, unsure of how her ideas fit into the larger picture. The other interns were quick to speak up, confident in their contributions, while Zora had hesitated to share her thoughts. "Zora." A voice broke through her thoughts. It was Elijah, standing in the doorway. He had surprised her with a visit, having texted her earlier in the day to let her know he'd be in town. "Elijah? What are you doing here?" Zora asked, her heart lifting at the sight of her friend. "I had a meeting nearby and thought I'd drop by to check in on you," Elijah said with a grin. "So, how's the internship going? You look like you could use a break." Zora laughed, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's going, well, I think. But it's a lot to take in. I'm trying to find my place here, but I don't know if I'm good enough for this." Elijah walked over and sat down beside her. "Zora, listen to me. You've got something they don't. You're different, and that's your strength. Don't compare yourself to anyone else. Just bring your best self to the table, and that's enough." Zora felt her chest tighten with emotion. Elijah always had a way of cutting through her insecurities and helping her see things clearly. "Thanks, Elijah. I just don't know if I'm cut out for this. Everyone here seems so confident, so much more experienced than I am." Elijah shook his head. "Confidence comes with time. You've got the talent, Zora, and that's what matters. Don't let the pressure to fit in get to you. You'll find your voice here. You just have to trust yourself." Zora took a deep breath, nodding. Elijah's words resonated with her in a way that felt grounding. This was her journey, and she was allowed to take it at her own pace. She didn't have to be perfect from the start. She just had to keep moving forward. Over the next few weeks, Zora's confidence slowly began to grow. She embraced the challenges, taking on projects that pushed her to think differently and collaborate more deeply. As she learned new techniques and refined her skills, she started to feel like she truly belonged in this world of innovation and creation. Her fellow interns began to respect her input, and she found herself leading a few brainstorming sessions, offering new ideas that incorporated her unique perspective. But the real breakthrough came when she was given the opportunity to present a project she had been working on in front of the entire team. It was a mixed-media digital installation, combining animation, interactive elements, and sound. Zora had poured her heart into it, pushing herself to take risks and experiment with new ideas. The day of the presentation, she stood before the team, her hands trembling slightly, but her voice steady. As she walked them through the project, explaining the concept and the technology behind it, she could see the nods of approval. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment, then, the applause began. "Zora, this is amazing," Sarah said, her eyes wide with admiration. "You've really brought something new to the table. This could be the beginning of something huge." For the first time in her life, Zora felt like her brilliance wasn't just something to hide. It was something to share, something to be proud of. That night, Zora sat in her apartment, reflecting on everything she had learned. The internship had been challenging, but it had also been incredibly rewarding. She had pushed herself beyond what she thought was possible, and in doing so, she had begun to break down the walls she had built around herself. The person she was becoming, the confident, collaborative artist, was someone she could finally be proud of. Zora smiled to herself. The journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. The days after Zora's successful project presentation were filled with a buzz of excitement and optimism. She had proven to herself, and to everyone else, that her talent was more than just a promise, it was real, and it had the potential to push boundaries. But with this newfound recognition came a heavy weight. The pressure to maintain that level of success, to continue impressing her peers and mentors, started to creep in. It was on a quiet Friday afternoon when Sarah called her into the main studio. Zora's heart skipped a beat, and she quickly followed Sarah to the large worktable in the middle of the room, where several senior designers and engineers were gathered. The team was in the midst of planning the next major project for the lab, and Zora had no idea what she was about to be asked to do. "Zora, we've been talking, and we think it's time for you to take on something bigger. We have a new project coming up, a collaboration with a top-tier tech company to create a virtual reality installation for an art exhibit. We need someone who's not just technically skilled, but someone who can think outside the box. And we think you're the one to take it on." Zora's mind raced. Virtual reality. It was something she had dabbled in before, but it was an entirely different beast, more complex, more technical, and more demanding than anything she had done so far. She felt a surge of both excitement and fear. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for, but could she handle it? Wow, that's a big ask," Zora replied, her voice tentative. "Are you sure I'm ready for something like that? It sounds pretty intense." Sarah smiled at her reassuringly. "We wouldn't offer it to you if we didn't believe in your abilities. You've already proven yourself, Zora. Now it's time to push your limits and see what you can really do. Don't overthink it, just dive in, and let your creativity take the lead." Zora looked around at the faces of her colleagues, senior designers and tech experts, all watching her with quiet anticipation. She could feel the weight of their expectations, but also the trust they had in her. This was her moment. This was what she had come here for. "Okay," Zora said, her voice gaining confidence as she spoke. "I'll do it. I'll give it my best shot." The first week of the project was a whirlwind of learning. Zora spent long hours in the lab, absorbing everything she could about virtual reality, immersive environments, the mechanics of interactivity, and the importance of user experience. The team worked tirelessly, collaborating on various aspects of the installation, but Zora couldn't help feeling like she was still a step behind. While the other designers were experienced in this type of work, she was still learning the ropes, trying to figure out how to translate her artistic vision into the complex world of VR. But then something unexpected happened. Zora was sitting at her workstation late one evening, struggling to piece together the elements of the VR environment, when a sudden spark of inspiration hit her. The idea had come to her like a flash of light, the solution to the problem she had been mulling over for days. It wasn't about trying to make the technology the centerpiece, it was about creating an experience. It was about using the VR space as a canvas, not just for static images, but for movement, for emotion. She could create an immersive world that interacted with the viewer's actions, one that felt alive, changing and evolving as the person explored it. Without hesitation, Zora began working on the concept. She didn't stop to second-guess herself. She dived into the project with everything she had, pouring her creativity into every pixel, every interaction. For the first time, she felt completely at home in the world of technology. The combination of art and science wasn't as intimidating as it had been before. It was liberating. The next day, Sarah and the team gathered to review the progress of the project. Zora nervously waited her turn. When it was finally her time to present, she stood up, her palms slightly sweaty, but her heart racing with excitement. She had something she believed in, something she wanted to share. As she explained her vision for the VR experience, her voice steadied, gaining strength with every word. She spoke about how the virtual world could adapt to the viewer's movements, how the art would evolve depending on how the user interacted with it, creating an entirely personalized experience. She showed the prototype she had built, a stunning, fluid world of digital landscapes that responded in real time to a user's gaze, their gestures, and their actions. The room was silent as the team watched the prototype in action. Zora held her breath, waiting for their response. Finally, Sarah spoke. "Zora, this is incredible. You've taken a complex project and turned it into something meaningful. The user experience here, it's unlike anything we've done before. This is the kind of innovation we were hoping for." The rest of the team nodded in agreement, and Zora's heart soared. It felt like the entire lab had just recognized her for the artist she truly was. The VR project wasn't just an idea, it was a breakthrough. It was proof that she could push beyond her comfort zone, that she could create art in new and unexpected ways. But as the team began discussing next steps, Zora couldn't shake the feeling that there was still so much to learn. She had come so far, but the road ahead was long. There was always another challenge to face, another obstacle to overcome. The days following the presentation were filled with intense work. Zora's VR installation began to take shape, and the process was both thrilling and exhausting. But with every challenge, Zora grew more confident in her ability to navigate this new, unfamiliar world of technology. She was learning to blend art with engineering, creativity with precision. It wasn't easy, but she knew she was becoming a better artist, a better creator, because of it. One evening, after another long day in the studio, Zora found herself sitting at the desk, her mind racing with ideas. She had reached a point in the project where she needed to make a critical decision, how to push the boundaries of her art even further. But the decision wasn't easy. She felt the weight of her fear again, the fear of failing, of pushing too hard and falling short. Would she be able to meet the expectations? Could she really innovate in a way that would make this installation stand out? Just then, Sarah walked into the room, noticing the tension in Zora's posture. "How's it going?" she asked, sitting beside her. Zora hesitated. "I think I'm getting stuck. I've reached a point where I need to take it to the next level, but I'm scared I'm going to mess it up. This is bigger than anything I've done before." Sarah smiled, her eyes filled with understanding. "Zora, remember this, innovation is about taking risks. It's about pushing yourself into unknown territory. And it's okay to be scared, that's when you know you're onto something important. You've got the talent, and you've got the courage to do this. Trust yourself." Zora looked up at Sarah, feeling a surge of determination. Sarah was right. The fear she was feeling wasn't a sign that she couldn't do it, it was a sign that she was on the verge of something great. With renewed focus, Zora dove back into her work. The road ahead wasn't easy, but for the first time, she didn't care about the fear. She was ready to innovate, to create something that would leave a mark, something that was uniquely hers. The pressure of innovation weighed on Zora, but with each passing day, something unexpected began to happen. She was growing closer to her colleagues. What started as a professional connection began to evolve into something deeper, a camaraderie she hadn't anticipated when she first walked into the lab. Zora had always kept herself at a distance, but now, she was learning to let people in. And with that, she was beginning to understand what it meant to be part of a team, not just as a contributor, but as a friend. It was the middle of the week when Sarah invited Zora to grab lunch with the team. At first, Zora hesitated. She wasn't used to socializing outside of work, and the idea of spending time with people outside of the professional sphere felt strange. But then she remembered Elijah's words from earlier in the internship, "You've got something they don't. You're different, and that's your strength." Maybe this was the perfect opportunity to test that idea, to embrace the idea that she didn't have to hide herself, even in social situations. "I'll come," Zora said, surprised by her own willingness. It felt like a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. The team gathered at a nearby cafe that had become their unofficial hangout spot. It wasn't anything fancy, just a cozy corner place with mismatched tables and comfy chairs, where the noise of conversation mingled with the clinking of cups and plates. As they sat down, Zora found herself surrounded by the warmth of friendly chatter, something she hadn't expected to find in a professional setting. "So, Zora," Elijah said, a playful grin on his face, "I've been hearing about this amazing VR project you're working on. You're going to make the rest of us look bad at this rate." Zora laughed, feeling a bit of warmth spread through her chest. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed Elijah's presence. He had always been her cheerleader, and now he was here, in the midst of her new world, showing his support. "Well, I'm just trying to keep up with the rest of you," Zora replied, her voice light. "I'm learning so much, and honestly, it's been overwhelming at times. But it's exciting, too." "Don't sell yourself short," Sarah chimed in, her voice full of pride. "You've already made an impact here, Zora. Your creativity is exactly what we needed for this project. It's not just about the technical aspects, it's about vision. And you've got that." Zora felt a rush of gratitude at Sarah's words. The validation meant more to her than she could express. She had always sought approval, but this was different. It wasn't just about meeting expectations, it was about belonging. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't just the outsider in the room. She was part of something. As they ate and laughed together, Zora found herself becoming more comfortable, not just with the work, but with the people around her. She wasn't just an intern anymore, she was a valued member of the team. Each person around the table had their own quirks and strengths, but it was the way they worked together that made them so powerful. They weren't just colleagues, they were a family, one that shared successes and failures alike, supporting each other along the way. That night, after the lunch ended, Zora walked back to the lab with Sarah, who had stayed behind to finish a few things. The streets of the city were still busy, filled with the hum of people going about their lives, but Zora felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt before. "You know," Zora began, looking over at Sarah, "I never expected to feel so connected here. I always thought that if I just kept my head down and did the work, that would be enough. But I didn't realize how important it is to actually be part of something, to share ideas, to be vulnerable, to trust people." Sarah smiled, her eyes warm with understanding. "That's the beauty of collaboration. You can't do it all on your own, and you don't have to. It's about lifting each other up, and that's how we get the best results. You're not just here because of your talent, Zora. You're here because of who you are, the way you bring others into the process. That's what makes you a great team member." Zora felt a lump form in her throat. She had spent so long pushing people away, trying to protect herself from the fear of rejection, that she had forgotten what it meant to truly connect. But now, she was realizing that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it was her strength. By allowing herself to trust her colleagues, to open up to them, she was creating a support system she hadn't known she needed. The next few days at work felt different. Zora was still working hard on the VR project, but now there was a sense of ease in the studio that hadn't been there before. She was part of the team, and it was evident in the way they worked together. When someone had a question, she was there to help. When a challenge arose, they tackled it as a unit. They weren't just individuals anymore, they were a collective, bound together by their shared goal. It was during a late-night brainstorming session that Zora truly felt the power of this connection. The team was facing a problem with the user interface of the VR installation. It wasn't as intuitive as they had hoped, and there were concerns that it might alienate some users. As everyone huddled around the table, exchanging ideas, Zora suddenly had a thought. "I think we're overcomplicating it," she said, her voice tentative but gaining confidence. "What if we simplified the interactions? Instead of bombarding users with options, what if we let them explore at their own pace? It could make the experience feel more personal, less overwhelming." The room went quiet as everyone processed her idea. And then, slowly, people began nodding, exchanging looks of realization. "Zora's right," Elijah said, grinning. "Sometimes less is more. Let's give users the freedom to discover." The conversation flowed from there, the team taking Zora's suggestion and running with it. What had started as a challenging obstacle turned into an opportunity for innovation, thanks to the collective creativity of the group. Zora had played her part, not just as a contributor, but as someone who had inspired others to think differently. As the project progressed, Zora's sense of belonging only deepened. She no longer saw herself as the outsider or the new kid. She was part of something bigger, a team that valued her for who she was, not just for what she could do. And in return, Zora began to let go of her fear, allowing herself to trust the people around her. By the time the project was nearing completion, Zora couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. She had started this internship as a nervous, self-doubting artist, unsure of her place in the world. But now, she was a confident, integral part of a team, someone who had not only contributed to a groundbreaking project but had also found a new kind of family. That night, as she left the studio for the day, Zora felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had come to the internship looking for professional growth, but what she had found was something more. She had found friendship, trust, and a sense of belonging. And in that moment, she realized that these connections, these people, were the true gifts she would carry with her long after the project was completed. As she stepped into the night air, the city lights flickering in the distance, Zora smiled to herself. The journey wasn't over. But for the first time, she wasn't walking it alone. It was the kind of morning that seemed perfect, bright sunlight streaming through the studio windows, casting long shadows across the floor as Zora entered the lab with a sense of quiet anticipation. The VR project was nearing its final stages, and everything was starting to come together. The immersive experience was working smoothly, the user interface had been refined, and the installation was nearly ready for the big reveal. Zora had spent weeks pouring her heart and soul into this project, and the thought of seeing it come to life at the art exhibit was enough to keep her up at night with excitement. But that morning, something was different. The air in the lab felt heavy, charged with an undercurrent of tension. Zora could sense it as soon as she walked through the door. She wasn't the only one who noticed. The rest of the team was gathered around the central workstation, their faces tense, their eyes glued to the screen. Sarah was speaking quietly with Elijah, but even from a distance, Zora could hear the worry in her voice. "What's going on?" Zora asked, her voice tight with concern as she approached them. Sarah turned to face her, her expression a mix of frustration and concern. "Zora, we've encountered a major issue. The software we've been using for the VR system just crashed. We've lost several key files, and I'm afraid the backup didn't save everything properly." Zora felt her stomach drop. This was not what she had expected to hear. A crash? With only days left before the exhibit? This could ruin everything. "How bad is it?" Zora asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's really bad," Elijah replied, his voice heavy. "We're missing the most crucial elements, the interactive features that made the experience unique. Without those, the whole installation falls apart. We don't have time to rebuild it from scratch." Zora felt a cold wave of panic wash over her. Everything they had worked for, everything she had worked for, was in jeopardy. Her mind raced, trying to grasp the magnitude of the situation. This wasn't just a minor setback. This was a catastrophe. Sarah looked at her with sympathy, but her eyes also held a determination that Zora admired. "We're going to fix this, Zora. But it's going to take all of us. We need you to step up and help us find a solution." Zora nodded, though her mind was clouded with uncertainty. She had spent so much time focusing on the artistic elements of the project, she hadn't paid as much attention to the technical side. Now, she was being asked to contribute to a solution that seemed far beyond her current abilities. She wasn't sure if she could rise to the occasion. The next few hours were a blur. Zora worked alongside the team, scrambling to recover the lost files and rework the interactive elements that had been wiped out. She felt like a fish out of water, struggling to navigate the technical side of the project while also trying to maintain her artistic vision. She could hear the frustration in her teammates' voices as they worked, but Zora was too caught up in the urgency of the situation to process it fully. It was late afternoon when Zora hit a wall. She had been trying for hours to recreate the interactive features, but no matter what she did, nothing seemed to work. The clock was ticking, and the pressure was mounting. Sarah had stepped away to deal with another part of the crisis, and Zora was alone at her workstation, staring at a blank screen. The weight of the project, of the expectations, felt unbearable. She could feel the panic rising in her chest. What if she couldn't fix it? What if all her hard work was for nothing? Her mind flashed back to the early days of the internship, when she had doubted herself and questioned whether she belonged. It was hard to shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, this was her moment of failure. And if she failed now, all of the progress she had made, everything she had worked for, would be gone. Tears stung at the corners of her eyes as she sat frozen at her desk, paralyzed by the thought of letting everyone down. She couldn't do this. She wasn't good enough. The imposter syndrome that had plagued her for so long came rushing back with full force. But then, a knock on the door broke her spiral. It was Elijah. "I thought I might find you here," he said, his voice soft. He walked in, glancing at her computer screen. "I know this is tough, but we're all in this together. You don't have to do this alone." Zora shook her head, wiping away the tears that had started to fall. "I don't know if I can fix it, Elijah. I've tried everything. I'm just not. I'm not enough." Elijah sat beside her, his presence calm and steady. "Zora, listen to me. You've already proven that you're more than enough. We wouldn't be here without you. This project, it's not just about one person. It's about the team, and we're all counting on each other. You have something that none of us do, you think differently. And that's why you're here." Zora looked at him, the weight of his words settling in her chest. Elijah was right. She wasn't alone in this. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about working together, finding solutions as a team. She wasn't just a cog in the machine, she was an essential part of it, and her creativity was something they needed. She took a deep breath and wiped her eyes. "Okay. I'll keep trying. Let's do this." The rest of the night passed in a blur of focus and determination. The team rallied together, pooling their knowledge and expertise. Zora found herself pushing through the exhaustion, using every ounce of creativity she had left to rebuild the lost elements. Slowly, but surely, the project began to take shape again. The interactive features were restored, and new ideas began to emerge as they worked through the technical problems. It was messy and chaotic, but it was also something extraordinary, something Zora had never imagined she'd be a part of. By the time the sun began to rise, the installation was nearly ready for testing. The team stood together, exhausted but triumphant. Zora looked around at her colleagues, who were now more than just teammates, they were friends, people she could count on when everything seemed impossible. "I think we did it," Zora said, her voice filled with awe. "I can't believe we pulled this off." Elijah smiled at her. "We didn't just pull it off, Zora. We created something. And we did it together." Zora smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride welling up inside her. She had faced her greatest fear, the fear of failure, and come out the other side stronger than ever. She had learned that failure wasn't the end, it was just a part of the process. And sometimes, the greatest breakthroughs came from the moments when everything seemed to fall apart. As the team packed up for the day, ready to get some rest before the exhibit, Zora felt a sense of peace. The fear had not gone away entirely, but she had learned to face it head-on. She had learned that failure wasn't something to fear, it was something to embrace, because it was in those moments of struggle that the real growth happened. Walking out into the early morning light, Zora felt like she had finally found her place. The road ahead was still full of challenges, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had a team behind her, and that made all the difference. The night of the art exhibit arrived, and with it came a whirlwind of emotions for Zora. She had spent weeks, no, months, working on the VR installation, pouring every ounce of creativity and determination into the project. But now, as she stood backstage in the dimly lit gallery, she couldn't shake the anxiety gnawing at her. Tonight wasn't just about showing her work, it was about proving to herself that she belonged in this world, that all the struggles, setbacks, and late nights had led to something meaningful. She glanced at the others as they prepared for the grand opening. Sarah, Elijah, and the rest of the team were busy making final adjustments to the installation. Everyone was calm, collected, except for Zora, whose heart seemed to be beating out of her chest. Elijah, Zora said, trying to steady her voice, what if no one gets it? What if they don't understand what I was trying to do? Elijah turned to her, his eyes kind but unwavering. You've already done the hard part, Zora. You've created something unique, something real. The rest of the world just needs to see it. They will. Trust me. Zora nodded, but doubt still clung to her. She knew her idea was innovative, this VR experience wasn't like anything anyone had ever seen before. It was immersive, personal, and had the potential to change the way people interacted with art. But would they see it that way? Or would it just be another failed attempt, lost in a sea of innovative projects that never quite made it? Sarah walked over to Zora, sensing her unease. You're ready, she said, her voice firm but encouraging. I've seen your work. And more importantly, I've seen the way you've grown. You didn't just make something great, you made something that matters. And that's what counts. Zora took a deep breath. She appreciated Sarah's words, but the fear of failure lingered. It wasn't just the exhibit she feared. It was the possibility that her genius, her unique perspective, would go unnoticed, misunderstood. The doors to the exhibit opened, and the crowd began to trickle in. The sound of soft conversation and the hum of excited anticipation filled the space. Zora watched from the sidelines as guests mingled, admiring the other works displayed on the walls. But her focus was on the VR installation, her installation, that stood in the center of the gallery. The sleek design of the headset, the glowing screen, the darkened room, all created an atmosphere of mystery and intrigue. She had put her heart and soul into every detail, and now it was out there for the world to see. Elijah noticed her anxiety and patted her on the shoulder. Come on. It's time. You've got this. With trembling hands, Zora adjusted her jacket and made her way toward the installation. She glanced over at Sarah, who gave her an encouraging smile. And then, without looking back, Zora stood in front of the headset, ready to guide the first visitors. A couple approached the installation, intrigued by the futuristic design. Zora smiled, her nerves still present but beginning to fade as she slipped into the role of guide. Would you like to experience the VR? She asked, her voice steadier than she had expected. The couple exchanged a glance and nodded enthusiastically. Zora helped them put on the headsets, explaining how the experience worked. She stood to the side as they immersed themselves in the virtual world, watching their expressions shift from curiosity to awe. The woman gasped as she interacted with the virtual elements, her hands reaching out to touch the digital landscape. Zora's heart skipped a beat. She could see it now, the wonder, the fascination in their eyes. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She had created something that allowed people to experience art in a new way, to engage with it, not just look at it. She had taken them somewhere no one else had dared to go. As the couple removed their headsets, their faces were lit up with excitement. "That was amazing," the man exclaimed. "It felt like we were really there." Zora smiled, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. It was working. It was really working. Word spread quickly throughout the gallery. People lined up to try the VR installation, each of them stepping into a world of imagination, creativity, and interactive art. Zora watched as visitors reacted with awe and delight, just as she had hoped. Her project was doing exactly what she had set out to do, taking people on a journey, allowing them to experience the art in a way that felt deeply personal and real. Hours passed, and the crowd only grew. Zora was so caught up in the success of the moment that she almost didn't notice the whispers. At first, they were faint, barely noticeable over the noise of the exhibit. But then she began to hear snippets of conversation that made her pause. "It's genius, isn't it? I've never seen anything like this before. This is groundbreaking. The way it connects with you, makes you feel, wow. I wonder who the artist is. They really captured something here." Zora felt her chest swell with emotion. She had feared that no one would understand her vision, but the opposite was true. People got it. They were amazed, fascinated, and most importantly, they were moved. This was the validation she had longed for, the recognition of her genius, but more than that, it was a reminder that her unique perspective had a place in the world. Her differences weren't something to hide, they were what made her work exceptional. By the time the exhibit was winding down, Zora was exhausted, but filled with an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. She stood back, watching the final few visitors interact with the installation. Sarah came up to her, a proud smile on her face. "You did it," she said simply, and Zora could see the pride in her eyes, too. Zora nodded, her heart still racing. "I didn't do it alone," she replied, glancing over at the team who had supported her every step of the way. "We did it together." As the final guests left and the gallery began to close, Zora felt a wave of relief wash over her. The night had been a success, a resounding, unforgettable success. But even more than that, she had come to understand something important. It wasn't just about the project, the recognition, or the accolades. It was about the journey. The lessons she had learned, the people she had connected with, and the way she had grown. This was only the beginning. Elijah walked over to her, his grin wide. "So, what now? What's next for the genius artist who just took the world by storm?" Zora laughed, shaking her head. "I don't know. But I do know one thing, this is just the start." And with that, she stepped out of the gallery into the cool night air, her heart full of hope for the future. She had found her place in the world, and for the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The days following the art exhibit were a blur for Zora. The overwhelming success of the VR installation had propelled her into the spotlight in ways she had never expected. Emails, calls, and messages poured in from artists, galleries, and tech enthusiasts who wanted to collaborate with her. Invitations to speak at conferences and attend workshops seemed endless, as if the entire world had suddenly taken notice of her work. Yet, in the midst of all the excitement, Zora felt something different, a sense of calm, a quiet understanding that she was only beginning to step into the person she was meant to be. It was early morning when Zora sat down at her desk in her apartment, her laptop open but her mind elsewhere. She was still processing the whirlwind of the past week. The exhibit had been a triumph, no doubt, but what came after was something she hadn't fully anticipated. It wasn't just the accolades that had changed her, it was the way she saw herself. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged. Like her voice, her genius, wasn't just valid, it was needed. But there was still a part of her, deep down, that questioned whether this success was fleeting, if the attention would fade as quickly as it had come. What would happen once the novelty wore off? Would she remain in the public eye, or would she return to the shadows, forgotten and overlooked? Zora pushed those thoughts aside. She had worked too hard, fought too long to let fear dictate her future. She had spent years wrestling with self-doubt, with the fear that her brilliance would never be enough. But now, after everything, she understood that her journey wasn't about proving herself to anyone else. It was about proving it to herself. As Zora scrolled through her emails, one in particular caught her eye. It was from a major tech company, one that had been following her VR project from the beginning. They were offering her a position as a lead designer, to work on a groundbreaking project that combined art and technology. The offer was everything she had dreamed of, the chance to collaborate with some of the brightest minds in the field, to push the boundaries of what art could be in a digital world. Her heart raced as she stared at the email, the weight of the decision sinking in. This was a huge opportunity, one that many artists and designers would give anything for. But it was also a commitment, one that would pull her away from the path she had just begun to carve. She would be working for a corporation, part of something larger than herself. Was that what she wanted? Was that her future? Zora leaned back in her chair, letting the cool air from the open window brush against her skin. She thought about everything she had learned over the past few months, the struggles, the triumphs, the moments when she had felt completely alone and then realized that she wasn't. She thought about Sarah, Elijah, and the entire team that had supported her, each one offering something unique that had made the project come to life. She thought about her parents, who had always believed in her even when she hadn't. And most importantly, she thought about herself, the girl who had once hidden her genius, afraid of standing out, and who now was stepping into a new chapter, one where her voice mattered, her ideas had weight, and her talent was celebrated. What if this offer from the tech company wasn't just an opportunity? What if it was a sign, one that urged her to continue pushing her boundaries, to keep evolving and growing as an artist and as a creator? But at the same time, she didn't want to lose the sense of freedom she had found in her art, the ability to create without constraints or expectations. Zora glanced over at the sketches on the wall, the designs for new VR projects she had started conceptualizing, the ideas that still lived in her head but had yet to be brought to life. She had always loved the idea of blending technology with art in ways no one had imagined before. The possibilities were endless, and she didn't want to limit herself by taking on just one kind of work. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts, and she got up to answer it. To her surprise, it was Sarah and Elijah, both of them grinning like they were in on a secret. "Hey, Zora," Sarah said as she stepped inside. "We were wondering if you were free. We've got something we think you'll be really excited about." Elijah, ever the pragmatic one, held up a thick folder. "It's not as dramatic as it sounds. But we think you'll want to hear it." Zora raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. She motioned for them to sit as she closed her laptop. "What's going on?" she asked. "Well," Sarah began, "we've been talking about the future of the VR project. And, well, a lot of people have been reaching out, wanting to collaborate with you." Zora's eyes widened, her heart skipping a beat. "Collaborate? With me?" "Yes," Elijah said. "And we think it's time for you to take this to the next level. There's a lot of potential here. People want your talent, Zora. And we want to help you take it further." They handed her the folder, which contained a proposal, one that had been carefully crafted, outlining a series of collaborations and opportunities with top tech companies, galleries, and art institutions. It was a plan to take her VR installations global, to showcase her work in ways that would give her the creative freedom she had always craved. But it also meant building a team, a brand, and stepping into a leadership role that would challenge everything she had known so far. "This is incredible," Zora murmured, flipping through the pages. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. This wasn't just about one project or one exhibition, it was about creating a movement, one that blended the worlds of art and technology in ways that could change everything. It was exactly what she had dreamed of, but it was bigger than anything she could have imagined on her own. Sarah and Elijah watched her closely, waiting for her response. So, Zora said slowly, looking up from the proposal. What does this mean for me? Elijah smiled. It means you don't have to choose between art and tech. You get to have both. Sarah added, you'll be leading something that could change the way people experience art, but you'll still have the freedom to create whatever you want, whenever you want. Zora felt a weight lift from her shoulders. This was it, the path forward, the one that allowed her to keep growing, keep creating, and keep challenging herself. She wasn't being forced into a mold, she was being given the tools to shape her own future. Taking a deep breath, Zora smiled, the decision finally clear in her mind. I'm in, she said, her voice filled with certainty. Let's do this. As Sarah and Elijah left her apartment, Zora stood by the window, looking out at the city below. The future was wide open, and for the first time, she felt completely ready to embrace it. She had no idea where this path would take her, but she knew one thing for sure, she was no longer afraid to take the next step. Her journey had only just begun. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?